Okay, welcome everyone to another Rising Tide Foundation Sunday lecture. Today we have the great pleasure of having our friend Nicholas Jones give us a presentation. Nick is an advisor to the Rising Tide Foundation. He has studied at the Royal Ballet School in London. He has danced professionally for the Stuttgart Ballet, the Ballet de Rennes, and Les Grands Ballets Canadiens de Montréal. He also founded in 2018 Artists Alliance for Africa, dedicated to providing classical arts training for children in Kenya with the goal of establishing a full academy in Kenya at some point. He has given lectures in the past for Rising Tide titled Cheikh Anta Diop's Dream of a United Africa, The Economic Vision for an African New Silk Road, as well as Africa, Past, Present, and Future, a fresh look at the Pan-African movement, just to name a few of the really wonderful and insightful lectures Nick has given for the Rising Tide. Today, he will deliver a lecture on the topic of the African chessboard. The AES puts the West in check. And so, without further ado, Nick, you have the floor.
Good day, everyone. Nice to see everyone again. It's been 9 months since I did my last class. It's good to be back with the Rising Tide. I always appreciate the platform, and yeah, thank you to Matt and Cynthia for all the fantastic work they do in giving us this platform and giving us a place to talk about things which are a little bit, on the edge of the cultural and geopolitical scene. So let's get started. Today we are on the African continent. The AES checks the West. I'm not sure if anybody here knows what it is yet, but we're about to find out. It's a very new formation, an alliance of states in the Sahel region, in the northern part of the continent of Africa on the western side. And right here in our headline page, I've got the three leaders of the three nations that have broken away from the Western-backed ECOWAS, which basically Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso all having rich traditions of coups, regime change, foreign interference, puppet dictatorships, you name it, but also very rich traditions of resistance. And such figures in the 80s, such as Thomas Sankara for Burkina Faso, was a fantastic leader, and we're going to talk a little bit more about him. And we could argue that his spirit is undergoing a sort of rebirth in the current leader of Burkina Faso, Mr. Traoré here. And we've got Assimi Goïta, who's the colonel leading Mali, and we've got Abdourahmane Chiani, who is the current leader of Niger. Let's get into what has been going on and who is orchestrating these events or not. So I'm going to go through a little bit of each country's history, at least the countries that are involved initially. We're going to do the first three, and then we're going to move on. It's going to be a bit of a crash and dash 30-minute history lesson. So here we go. Burkina Faso, renamed by Thomas Sankara himself, was originally colonially called the Upper Volta, based off the Volta River. Now, most of the African territories upon receiving independence were named after geographical regions. It's part and parcel of what the British and the French do, the same way we named Lake Victoria after ourselves. But then those countries were just named after whatever river we'd named or mountain and by doing that, also we kind of erase the history or like the cultural semblance in the psychology of those people without a name that represents the people, like represents a nation. We kind of lose some part of our epistemology and our actual soul. So Thomas Sankara did the right thing, renamed the country Burkina Faso, which actually translates as land of upright or honest peoples. And I would say Sankara represents the essence and substance of this nation. So prior to colonialism, it's inhabited by what was known as the Mossi Empire, which was an empire for about 700 years. I've touched on it in other classes with Cheikh Anta Diop. It was a smaller empire alongside the Ghana, Mali, and Songhai empires that each one culminates after the other. It's kind of like upon each one breaking up, they reformed and reunited into a greater empire and brought more of the outsiders in on the border regions until ending in the Songhai Empire, which eventually gave way in the 1600s. Independence was gained in 1960 after a brief, you could actually argue in the whole history of Africa's history, the actual period between the scramble of Africa and what we call the colonial period, strictly colonial, where we actually occupy politically these nations, is only about 60, 70 years long. It starts in 1896 and it finishes in 1960. And pretty much every country, bar South Africa and the ones that we know with the apartheid regime, they all receive independence by the end of the 70s, pretty much. There are examples. There are, others that didn't, but the majority. So we're going to go through some of the presidents. We have the first president was Mr. Maurice Yameogo. He is termed, you'll look on the internet and basically you'll see him as a dictator. He's not entirely, so yeah, that's the thing about Western, like the way we've written history is all of these characters basically fall into a black and white box. They either good and work for us, or they're dictators and they don't work for us. So, and that's not to say that if you see dictator, that means they're a good person. Okay, don't do that one, because that's just flipping. It doesn't necessarily mean that either. There, of course, were bad dictators in Africa that were propped up by the West as well. But there were many cases, President Moi in Kenya being one such example, where we called them dictators, and in fact they weren't. They were in the process of creating law and order, which is essential for any nation to actually develop an economy or to develop a good standard of living. If we look at America's early history, there were a lot of coups, there was a lot of assassinations, there was a lot of political turmoil, there were civil wars. So it's interesting that a lot of Western people have a slanted view of African politically and African leaders as all being corrupt, and like it's a bit over excessive, because if we look at the start of other republics and other nations, they're traditionally chaotic and pretty brutal in the form of like killing people and moving people aside so that certain groups can have their way with entire nations. So Maurice Yameogo is actually a Pan-Africanist. He is deposed by coup. Based on my research here, most likely all those coups are foreign. They're backed by foreign powers. So basically, we're talking about France and America mostly in this region, but also Britain, with Ghana and Nigeria being two behemoths in the region too. Then we have a coup where Sai Zerbo takes over. We can argue actually that in Burkina Faso's history, the military has what is considered a certain kind of, you could argue that there's more charisma and more honor in the characters serving in the military than in the political sphere. Because the problem since independence is that a lot of the politicians were already considered part of the elite, and they have over time, through gifts and briefs and suitcases, been slowly corrupted into basically serving not the interests of the local populations, but the interests of foreign powers such as France and America. So one of the big issues since independence has been that, like, you've got the nations and the people, but then the elite is basically pulled apart from its civilization and joins into this global entity and basically does everything in their power to not develop those nations and just simply to receive short-term payouts. So we'll go through the names. We've got Dr. Jean-Baptiste Ouedraogo, not a good leader. So basically that was the time just before, like when we have the first three leaders, Yameogo to Lamizana to Zerbo, it was actually all going pretty well, even though there were coups and after Yameogo, the military comes in, but the military ran the country for 12 years and did a relatively good job in maintaining law and order and stability. And it's when you have that kind of economic situation, it is very, very hard to maintain simply just order and stability within a border, because the people are desperate for aid and for things to get better. So it's very easy to stir up strife and civil discontent. So that's always what we do whenever we are disappointed with a leader that comes in. But then we had a coup in 84, which basically those two people, Ouedraogo and Sankara, were part of the same party. And there were two factions, and basically Sankara's faction, initially Sankara didn't want to lead, but he was pushed into leadership because basically everybody else was not capable, and he had such charisma and such he's a real artist, actually. If you look and listen to his speeches, one such speech is the one he did in 86, I think it was, the year before he got assassinated in the African Union in Addis Ababa, where he warned the African Union that if they did not join him in his pledge to sort out debt forgiveness and to restructure the debt that had been hoisted on Africa during the colonial period. And bear in mind, when Africa got those independence agreements from France and Britain, none of the financial contracts or agreements went with it. Okay, they all stayed in place and they all still had to be fulfilled. But Sankara came back and said, well, basically, we're not going to be able to move out of the current situation that we're in unless we restructure the entire agreements that we've had with these colonial powers since independence, because actually that's also still a big problem. Like, we're not going to be able to economically grow with these debts on us and with these conditions on us. And I think a lot of people living in, the West and in comfortable countries nowadays that have good standards of living really do struggle to understand that point. They just think, it's just a simple case of, if you have democratic institutions, they'll just function and work and people will get their voice heard. But it's just not that. Like, when you're dealing with territory and space, you're looking at a power system that basically is given the mandate to rule. And then even if they have good intentions, it's very easy when the conditions are so bad for an outside power to come in, offer you something that looks good. And before you know it, that entire plan and vision is sacrificed and we lose the path. And that basically happens each election. So after Sankara, who was kind of like Pan-Africanism reborn again, so the essence and substance of what happened in the 60s comes back again in the 80s, but then he was assassinated very quickly because we had to quiet that voice. And his best friend, so this is how brutal the West is, we actually co-opted his best friend, who's been his best friend, knew his parents, everything, had spent time in his family. We actually co-opted his best friend to launch the coup against him, and then put his best friend Blaise Compaoré in power, and he reigned as a dictator for 27 years and brought about massive economic strife and deconstructed everything, or a lot of what Sankara had done during that time, and basically worked for his Western lackeys and globalist masters. So that's just an example of the brutality in dealing with each nation whenever it goes on an independent course. It's just basically sit down and do what you're told again. And then we had Michel Kafando compromised, Kabore compromised, Damiba compromised. Then finally a re-emergence just recently of Ibrahim Traore. I would say he's literally born in the same spirit as Sankara. God has placed a mandate in someone else and he's going for another ride. We're going to try again to get this independence thing going. So with all of that, then we have, with Traore coming, we had basically over between 21 and 23, I think 5 coups in this area. And they have all, the difference in these coups is that none of them came about through foreign interference. All of these coups were part of an internal discussion and a decision basically within the military that the political situation had gotten so out of control and so corrupt again that it was now time for the military to take back over the security of the nation and to reform the political sphere to go with a clean slate again. And this time with the potential help of other partners in the world who are more trustworthy and can provide the security needed to actually believe, to build an independent political system. It still hasn't really happened in Africa. So we have the creation of the AES, the Alliance des États Sahel. I say it in French because it's a much better abbreviation in French than in English. So they joined with Mali and Niger in September 2023. And I'll just say for now, it was all helped along by Russian-assisted diplomacy. So Russia has been rapid on the African continent for the past 24 months, and we're going to go into that in the last 30 minutes. So reasons for coup d'etats: dictatorship, puppets. The They're put in there. Maybe you'll have a patriot, the patriot's overthrown, puppet put in. Then maybe you'll have the emergence of a patriot in the opposition. Well, to stymie that, we need to put another puppet in, and we'll keep on rolling the barrel, divide and conquer, divide and conquer. But at some point, even we are unable to control the process of events, especially when you have other global powers who can support certain individuals in their vision and their aims for their own nation. So this is what's happening now. We're basically witnessing a massive power structure change on the globe. And what it's allowing the global south to do is to re-pick its mentors. Okay, because up until now, the West hasn't provided like a really good mentor role. So infighting between political elites, that's all caused by us. Rule of law overall, we just allow that to happen or don't. Like if we're allowing it to happen, it's because we like him. If we're not allowing it to happen, it's because he's a dictator and he's got to go. Serving foreign interests over domestic. There you go. That's the briefcase. Here's the suitcase of money. Will you do it? Yeah, I'll do it. Inability to fight terrorism. That's basically the main thing right now, okay? Because I'm going to show you that, like, how we have allowed terrorism to regrow in a whole nother region, just like that desert over in the Southeast Asia. We're now basically developing an entire region in the Sahara with that same basket case, okay? And it's to basically stop what is happening in this harmony of civilizations right now. We want to break up as much as possible this momentum that we know is already a ball rolling down a hill. Inability, so then finally, save the best to last, IMF and World Bank policies. I mean, that's why their economies never really got better, because basically, if you look at the projects that are done in Africa, they're these tiny little projects all under the boondoggle of like green projects. And basically, they're tiny little portions of money that are put to like projects that don't really develop the economy or make anything better. So it's like 5 solar panels in this village. And then what you'll find is actually only 2 solar panels go in that village. The 3 that were supposed to go didn't show up. And the money for those 3 somehow ended up in that person's pocket. That's what's happening. Okay. So actually, some people have called this like a poverty, famine, population Ponzi scheme, right? It's the same as how the green movement and like green stocks have been used to create a massive bubble in the West. And because the economics of that industry are completely built on lies, that bubble will crash because the actual energy for those things could not produce enough to actually build an economy that will have some sort of self-sustenance and actually develop the greater good. It will actually be paying for itself. So we have over here, just finally, present and future significance. It's for the want of good governance. The people want sovereign presidential leadership. They want they need authority. They need to be led by a president. It's no good having parliamentary systems. The British forced this on Africa to again be able to control the justice, like the legislation, to be able to control different factions. For example, in Kenya, they even wear the wigs. Still to this day, they wear the wigs that we have in the House of Lords. So, it's at some point it becomes a little bit of almost humor. And yeah, someone's bowing. So organization of the military, essential strategy. If you haven't got secure borders, you're not going to be able to resist regime change or foreign powers intervening. And you're not going to be able to develop an economy the way you want to develop it, because anytime they go and build a great power project, like what happened to Gaddafi, the West can just create a no-fly zone and NATO will just then start a bombing campaign. Like, honestly, the Western public doesn't even know what we bombed. Like, if they actually asked, they might be absolutely crazed, because they'd be like, oh my God, we just basically blew up all their infrastructure. It's like, and like there were loads of people like walking about or like around that when we did it. So like dams, hydropower, like you name it. Like, how did Libya go from being the richest nation in Africa to now bottom 5 poorest? That's a plan. Like, that's not coincidence. That's not because the Libyan people wanted it, obviously. So when you remove a strong leader like that, and of course, again, not saying Gaddafi is perfect. We need to really look into these characters to understand. Like Gaddafi did at one point work with us, but then, I mean, we're going to go into the Soviet Union also and about how like they messed up because in the time of the 60s, the Soviet Union and China, they're not capable of supporting these nations. They're just not. Like Soviet Union is in a process of crumbling decline since Stalin's gone, and China is in a process of upheaval and rebuilding the nation. They're both not capable, and they're both also under um the claws of colonialism, and they're both being damaged and fighting colonialism themselves, which again has another kind of ramification because that gives them the credibility today to help Africa. So it's coming full circle. Like we are living in the best of all possible worlds. Like, it's a real thing. Republic of Mali, the name Mali, the place where the king lives, because Mali was the empire. And now if you look at Mali, Mali is completely cut off from the sea. I guess that's a coincidence too. That was just meant to be, right? Like the former empire of Africa ended up being cut off from all of its former trade routes that made it an empire, that made it great, that made it unified. So split them up, make sure this one is landlocked. And we love creating landlocked nations. You know, it doesn't make any sense in anybody's mind why a landlocked nation would actually come into existence. But we've done that a lot in Africa, and it's basically to separate each northeast, south, and west and create massive expanses where we can harbor terrorists. And we're going to look at that. Like, really, you're going to see between 2012 and now how much terrorism has grown in the Sahel region and the amount of people that it's actually affecting. So Mali was formed in 1226 and was part of the Mali Empire. It went to 1610. It was previously the Ghana Empire from the year 100 to 1200 and eventually absorbed into the Songhai Empire. I did another class on this, so you can go watch that if you want more. And there's more. Like, God, I just spent 4 days. My eyes are almost like glued to the screen because every time I go back into this, there's more. And I'm just like, oh God, like we have done nothing on this subject. So like, yeah. Then we have Mansa Musa. He's like my guy. He was a philosopher king. It was considered the golden age of the Mali Empire. And it was once considered at the time one of the richest empires in the world. There's a great story of when he went to Egypt. He had so much gold that the currency of Egypt devalued so much while he was there that he had to buy some of the currency with his gold to help them revalue the currency. That's how rich he was. So he didn't, he left a trail wherever he went, and he was actually literally and is considered one of the richest people that ever lived. Now, then the West, I guess the West understood because that's one of the reasons why we went and took the resources. It's just like once you see that kind of king, you're like, I better get there. It's the same way the Romans looked at the Chinese with the Silk Road. It's like, well, you might want to conquer that. So by the end of Mansa Musa's reign, we had also not just great riches and powers, but real wealth. He had built the Sankore University, still stands to this day, and it had the largest collection of books in Africa since the Library of Alexandria. When the Library of Alexandria burnt down, a lot of the scholars and priests and all the people around there, the intellects, they grabbed as much as they could, caravanned across the Sahara, and put all of what they could save in the library in Timbuktu. So after the Romans had done already the period, like the first period of colonialism, like the Romans had done what they'd done to the Egyptians, they fled across the Sahara to get away from the Mediterranean, to get away from that border there, so that they would actually be able to preserve the civilizations in the history. And at one stage while he was king, it housed over 25,000 students. Okay, this is in like 1500. 25,000 students, and it had one of the largest libraries in the world with over 1 million manuscripts. But then collapse, like all empires, they start to collapse. Infighting, drought, famine, locusts. Africa, famine and locusts, like they have a big problem with that. We're going to talk about that as well after the independence years. Like it's so hard to like develop an economy when you have these very natural problems that you have to overcome first. And Africa is like a booming natural continent with life, flora, fauna, and animals just literally propping up everywhere. So especially in the insect life, like there really does need to be, and is now, a lot more prevention going on when it comes to locust and other infestations. And it is working because, we have a lot less food poverty nowadays. But we have other empires, like it broke up into empires like the Wolof, which is still a language today. That's in my other class, Ushenka and Diop. They reckon that Wolof even came from Egypt because a lot of the hieroglyphs in Wolof language are the same as the hieroglyphs in Egyptian. And that would make sense because all of those manuscripts came from Egypt about more than 1,000 years ago, all the way to Timbuktu. And so that language kept extending to the Atlantic coast and ended in Senegal. And Wolof is now only spoken in Senegal. So, and kind of ended there, where also Mansa Musa left that coast and went to South America. And that's why Christopher Columbus, when he landed there, found blacks, because the Africans had already gone to South America before we did. That's a little short sidestep. Then we have the founding. After the period of colonization and the scramble for Africa, we have the founding of the Sudanese. They call it French Sudan, originally Mali, in 1958. And immediately, actually, they tried to refederate or like reunify the empire, the former empire. So that was led by a guy called Modibo Keita, Pan-Africanist, great friend and ally of Kwame Nkrumah. Again, not a perfect guy, but like pretty great. And considering the circumstances, like did enormous good for his country. And they tried with Senegal to create the Mali Federation in 59, literally 1 year after independence. And well, it failed because of the leader of Senegal, Leopold Senghor, who was completely like with France. And he was great friends with a guy called Felix Houphouët-Boigny, who was an African, but was completely in the grasp of his lackeys in Paris. So he had been trained, educated at the Sorbonne University. And basically, like, yeah, he was very much in the hands of his masters. And so that federation fell apart because Senghor wanted to remain part of the French currency, the French community, whereas Keita wanted to have full independence. So this was the other thing. During the period of independence, France, unlike Britain, was considered a little bit nicer because they offered independence. Okay, but then whatever, like, like it's like, oh, we're giving you Christmas. So then France, they offer them independence, but it's like this. It's like you can have independence and join this French community, which is like a financial organization. And basically, we're going to create the CFA, which is a currency for you. And all of that money is going to be held in a Paris bank. And whenever it's also because you don't have the institutions to do this for yourselves. And, where are you going to store all the money when you sell all those resources and da. So basically, as soon as giving independence, reinstituting a way of not allowing real financial and economic independence by, of course, controlling the currency. Obviously, that makes sense. Then taxing the currency. And obviously, when we start looking into currency exchanges, basically, we realize that whenever the Africans are selling things in their currency to America or to any other country, those dollars, they first go to France before they go to that country. So also bear that in mind. There's a lot of money being taken out of that transaction that never ends up in Sierra Leone, Cote d'Ivoire, or any of these countries. It stays in Paris. And actually Paris, financial analysts estimate that since the time of independence, Paris has been making about $150 million a year. And in total, they reckon the number could be about 600 billion in actually how much currency they've made just in this kind of transactional. Now, look, if you run around the internet, you're going to see that number go from like 300 to trillions. Some people are out there like, you should pay us back for all the labor. And it's like, well, really, if you stack up all the hours and everything and all, you build everything, I don't know. But I went for the middle, and 600 bill felt good. And look, it's just a number. It just gives us the gravity of just in that period of time, how much monetary value these countries have missed out on because they have an intervention, basically, like a middleman who always sits in between everything they do. Okay. So Mali, Modibo Keita, great Pan-African leader. Then you have, of course, the French don't really like him. So they're like, oh, we need to have a coup. And then we have Moussa Traore come in. But anyway, he turns out like he's a dictator and we have to have the March Revolution of 91 to get rid of him. Then we go on to Konare, who was considered more of a patriot again. Again, like when we get into the middle, like Konare Toure, they're definitely patriots. But you will find things where, of course, given the nature and the circumstance that their country is in, they do have to work with the West. Like they are their hands are literally tied. And I know that's a very cliche expression, but when we talk about Africa, the hands are still tied. Like you know, like it's naive to think that we can just go about doing as we wish in a world where power defines normally the conclusion, not essentially because it's creativity that develops the future, but power decides how that creativity is used often. And if the power's good, great. If the power's bad, like we are with AI right now, like the new technology, the new fire that's being given to mankind. On one hand, you've got an idea of it, which is like, this is awful for the world, but that's the Western, of course, that's what the Western oligarchy would tell us. Whereas in the East, they have a completely different perspective of it because anyway, their ideology is not seeking to use things to control people, but rather to develop because that's the path that they're on. I say they're patriots or that, we have to also take it sometimes with a grain of salt. You will find, especially in Western articles, instances of these leaders cracking down on protesters, anti-government protesters, but that's because a lot of these protests are like black bloc groups. They are tiny, they are funded, they are foreign. And a lot of the time, they don't even really know what they're doing. They're just being paid to go onto the street and shout something with a board. I mean, it's very easy. And then you got a journalist right there, right now, that goes up on BBC, Al Jazeera, CNN in a matter of 10 minutes. And before you know about it, everyone in the Western world who actually has access to that information thinks that something big's taking place in the capital of Mali or Bamako or wherever it is. Now, it will literally be like one street on one avenue. It's theater. It's real theater. It's like really not that intelligent. Like anybody could do it. But we do have people problems. So this is but the sad part of all of this is while this division and this kind of conquer process that the West is enacting on Africa all the time, the people, there's no progress like made. So we're like toppling leaders, putting them in, toppling them. Whenever there's an independent election, they get toppled again. So major reasons, public dissatisfaction, yeah, it's there, but it's played upon. And we using, because of course we have the CNN and the BBC in all these countries, so we use those news and media agencies to tell the people about their leadership. We tell them about their leaders, like they're bad for you, he's good for you. You know, we have control in that way too. Yeah, foreign interference, bad leadership, terrorism, IMF or World Bank policies. These are the major reasons basically for every country not getting or not progressing, because actually the nature of humankind is to progress. Other factors, you have rebels, Tuareg rebels. It's a genuine problem. It's an ethnical problem. And again, something that was kind of started like right at the beginning of independence. The Brits did the same in Kenya between the tribes there, between the Kikuyu and the Luo. We gave the Kikuyu all of the power and then gave the other tribes none of the power. And then we gave land rights to this one and gave the others none. And basically that was dependent on who allied with us, who were like royalists and who were like patriots. And the patriots got the worst deal. So yeah, that's how independence was like given. So that's the thing when people over my time, like I always had this, as when I was younger, I had this lovely idea of like Africa, like they got political independence. And it's a great story and it is a real story. It's just the more you look into it and then you're like, oh, like it's Well, it's still going. Let's say that. Like we're still realizing that process. Takes a long time for independence to actually become like that city on a hill. Now the final part of this trilateral alliance, we've got Niger. So Niger also, so all of these countries formerly a part of the Mali Empire, Ghana Empire, and the Songhai Empire. So this is what is also very important to bear in mind, because I'm taking it from there and dragging it forward, and we have a dark age in the middle that we also have to talk about. But there is a renaissance coming. There is a rebirth of the original culture, like the culture that has always been there, but maybe forgotten because of the darkness, but is now being reorganized and redeveloped to actually gain its final independence, right? So major trading crossroad between West, North, and East Africa. The jungle region below, they are what is called the Sahel region. It's a grasslands region. Other rulers include the Sultanate of Ayr, is an Islamic sultanate that came across the deserts from the side of Egypt. They ruled periodically. It wasn't that long, not as long as it says there. They came in and they went back out. And then we had the Kanem Bornu Empire. It's two, Kanem and Bornu. They sat either side of Lake Chad, and very successful empire, that one, like very peaceful, had a very large expansive area. And at that time, Lake Chad was full of water. So you can imagine it was really green, and it wasn't like it is today, which is like Boko Haram terrorists and all sorts of insurgencies, like creating all sorts of civil strife there. Like Lake Chad used to be a place of peace and harmony and prosperity when it was part of Kanem Bornu Empire. Then you have then it starts to break up. So then you have the Hausa, the Doso, and the Dendi kingdoms. They're like the breakups of those bigger empires. Then we have a period of French colonialism. So this is like going into 1900, which I'm gonna keep reiterating. It is a short period in the entire history. So just always bear that in mind. It's not the entire history. It's a short period in the entire history. It's just you could call it even a hiccup, actually, especially further into the future. If I go to 2250 now and look back, potentially it's like really small hiccup, you know? So especially if you're great by then, it would be like really small. So then that's 1900 to 1958. I mean, of course, we know that the coastland was colonized in the 300 or so years before, but the Europeans never went into the heartland. So all of those populations that were on the coastland that didn't want to get involved in the slave trade, because there were Africans that went to islands and bought slaves from the chieftains on the land and sold those slaves off the islands to us. It's not that we just went in and took them. It's not just that. There were transactions with African people, of course. Like we're all people. And but the coastlands were very much colonized earlier. But yeah, we didn't really go in until the scramble for Africa, where I think also because by then we've had a First World War, and we were like, we have the power, like the military and the technical power to go in and actually scope this area, because it's like huge continent and like massive expanses where there's no roads. So we actually started to have the technology and the science to really be like, okay, we can scope this now, we can map it out and understand it. So since independence, Niger's had a lot. Okay, like in just a 60 or 65-year period, like Niger has had a lot of upheaval, and good and bad. So we have Hamani Diori, originally not a good start, was very much in the hands of the French. And then we have Seyni Kunche, Ali Saibu. Then we have a national conference where we have no president at all for a couple of years. Then we have Usman comes in, Mainasara, Mamadou, Isufu, Bazoum, and Chiani. So I'll just quickly, the T's and the P's basically sum up. I think everybody can make sense of that. Again, it's not clear cut, but you know, when we look at the nuance And like the thing is, these people are basically trying to do basically like if I ever am looking as to deciding who's a patriot and who's a traitor, the first thing I look at is economics. Like if you can't make the standard of the lives of your populace better in 10 years, then you're not doing the right job. Like you're probably working for someone else. So if the economy has not improved, if you haven't got 4 or 6% or something growth, or infrastructure is being built, or train lines, or that's a good start. You know, that's where we can start with and be like, okay, if no national, strictly national progress has been made, that's a good way of telling. But then on top of it, we have other things. So like loans, deals with the IMF, World Bank policies where austerity measures were put in. That's a clear-cut example of someone being a traitor. Like you're obviously not serving your people's interests. If you're taking a lot of money to then put a lot of monetary pressure on the people, it's like, what's the point in taking that loan? Well, why are you taking 800 million to then tell the people that you got to spend less? Then don't take the money. There's no point, right? That's the thing about austerity measures. Why that doesn't make any sense economically, to reduce consumption and to reduce people action in the market for the sake of receiving this money. So we know that these loans from the IMF and World Bank, they're not loans. It's hush money. And that's how it's generally been used for the past 50 years. It's to do as you're told. So we have the foreign interference, puppet regimes, corruption. There was big violence in the Agadez region with Niger. That was a big problem for them. It's a regional issue, and it's mostly the divide and conquer strategy that caused it. Ethnical problems, tribal issues that have all been heightened because, like I said, in the period of independence, some were patriots and some allied with us because because of fear and because of, it's better to go with them and get something than to go this way and get nothing. Yeah, it's a tough one, that. I mean, actually, if I put myself in their shoes, even to this day, I'm like, what option would I pick? And what is the actual intelligent option if you want to emancipate and give salvation to your people? We look at Kwame Nkrumah and the way he danced with Queen Elizabeth. Like, we got to look at that guy to understand more how to work evil and to actually still bring about progress while you've got all of these people around you basically trying to assassinate you, destroy your credibility politically. Kwame went through like 9 assassination attempts. He did eventually end up being exiled in Romania, but he managed to rule and lead Ghana for a good 16 years before. It was from 60 until 76, I think, before he got actually finally kicked out. So, like, really good job. When you look at all the other nations around, I haven't put Ghana on here today because they're a British, like former. It's like more on the British side. This is more French, but and nowadays, of course, they're in ECOWAS and they definitely work with the West more so. But they've reached a certain economic status now where they can play both sides a little bit more. We're going to talk about that a bit more when I get to Russia. Like, because you've got African countries that are really low economically and they just need like a very serious mentor to get them out. Whereas you've got ones that were already given a certain amount of semblance and dignity from the West, and they can kind of play East and West against each other. So I would say like South Africa, Kenya, Nigeria, Ghana, these ones right now, they're not picking sides. And Africa for a long time has had a policy of neutrality. They don't have to pick sides. I keep talking to other analysts and friends of mine that kind of do that thing of like, oh, well, this guy's bad because he's with the West. And I say, yeah, but it's none of their business. Like, at the end of the day, like, they don't have to pick a side. Like, they should pick the side that does best for them. Actually, that's leadership. Like, you should pick the greater good. And okay, like, you have world ramifications too. But when did the world care? It's that thing of like, Africans say, like, well, you're only, even with the East, sure, you care about us. And it's a very nice overture that's happening right now, and we're going to talk about it. But we understand the co-alignment of interests as well. There's a pragmatism here, and sure, the leadership is not thinking pragmatically; they're thinking philosophically and on a principled level. But a lot of the others is more pragmatism at play. So that's the Republic of Niger. So let's get on to the actual formation. So let's jump back. This is a map of the former empires. So on the right, I have the three that I want to focus on, which is the Ghana Empire, the first one, the small one, or small, the circular one here in the middle, the red line, which became the Mali Empire, which stretched all the way from the Atlantic, Senegal, all the way down to Guinea here, all the way across to Mali, and just touching the border of Niger there, where the river goes from Gao in Mali down into Niger. And then it became the Songhai Empire, where it moved further back inland, probably due to the beginnings of colonization too, to protect itself. So yeah, those three empires went from one to the other to the other. There was like a period where it started to collapse, but then it reunified and got even bigger. So that's to prove that Africa was already in the throes of a very beautiful and golden civilizational process that basically, okay, after the Songhai Empire, it starts to break up into other empires. But we can imagine that given the time to reunify, it would have happened naturally. But of course, there was intervention. And so it will still be realized. That's what we're going to get to by the end of this class. But yeah, like with all continents, there's a process of division and then unification and then division. And I don't think it's equal like an accordion, but I think the necessary implications of division are to learn about ourselves in such a way that we realize, like, maybe the future would be greater having realized that division is definitely a bad art, like, you know, having actually divided and allowed ourselves to be divided, and then we would realize, okay, like, never to do that again. So then the rebirth is even stronger each time because of the lessons from the period of chaos. And yeah. So yes, these are the other, like on the larger map of Africa on the left, we have the other kingdoms that I just like to show for fun: Ethiopia, Kush, Aksum, Rwanda, Buganda here, Malawi. These were the other kingdoms that exist all across the continent. Actually, Africa has more tribes and more different ethnicities than any other continent in the world. Then we go into the modern history period of the, you know, First World War and Second World War kind of coming about. And basically with that upheaval, the world upheaval that it caused, we can then kind of resculpt the world in our image. And so 1880, before we've actually like really decided that we're going to occupy the continent and extract from it minerally and start to like enrich ourselves, we can see that there are those empires there. Like you've got the Dendi Kingdom, the Doame, Sokoto, Kanem Bornu still exists around Lake Chad there. Senegal now has already been colonized by France, but you've got the Tukula Empire, which we're going to talk about a little bit. That was part of Guinea, or became part of Guinea. And you've got all of these in here. Congo was already colonized because, well, it's very wealthy in terms of resources. Rwanda, very famous. So yeah, that's to give you an image of what was there, divided, sure, but still origin, natural of itself. And then by 1913, in a short 33-year period, basically all of the regions of Africa had been split, and the European powers had taken everything. So only Ethiopia and the Sultanate of Darfur, but yeah, and Liberia maintained independence. The rest became occupied, and then the beginning of resource extraction started taking place, because up until that point we've already taken a lot of people, which is actually the greater wealth that Africa lost, because if you could equate how many people those people that were taken would have created, the exponential effect, like maybe Africa's population would be double today, maybe about 3 billion, we could argue, because the number they say is anywhere from 150 to 200 million men were taken off the continent to the Americas, South, Caribbean, and North, and also into Europe and places and sold. So how many children potentially were lost? Also, I think that for me, like if you would actually to look at the loss economically, that for me is the greatest loss, like the human value, because you need men especially to build things and to defend nations and to lead and to lead their families and to actually bring about prosperity in those places. So that was one of the greatest losses. So from 1913 onwards, and it does make sense as well with the First World Wars coming around, like we needed more resources and like, we're undergoing an industrial revolution. And yeah, I still believe we're living in the best of all possible worlds. It's just like the how, when like it's both good and bad, and I'd say slightly more good than bad still, but yeah, it's just there's a lot of horror as well. So bringing it now right back to today, we have, you can see in these maps already, right? Like the kind of reformation of those former empires. So Niger, Mali, and Burkina Faso, which it says here are in the Liptako Gourma region. Like it's the river Niger runs through those countries. It doesn't run through Burkina Faso, it runs close to the border. But basically the river Niger could and should become a great channel for economic trade, and there need to be train lines and motorways and channels of economic development set up, especially along the river, but also going northeast, southwest. But rivers are a great place to start, and the Niger River is a particularly impressive one. So you've got three of a kind: Burkina Faso, Niger, Mali, and they're in the black. And below, along the coast, is the ECOWAS nations, who they were absolutely like, when these nations broke away, the ECOWAS is serving Western interests. So there was initially the threat of conducting a war against those nations. So Nigeria, especially under a man right now called Tinubu, like they threatened Niger with military intervention. And then upon doing so, Mali and Burkina Faso signed an agreement with Niger that said that if any single one of those countries were to be attacked, the other two would come to the aid of the other. So then, of course, ECOWAS backed down from its threat, which anyway, they've only been told to make that threat. It's not that they want to threaten their African brothers. It's just, that's the thing. Like you got a lot of outside control. So they did that, but then it backfired diplomatically, because of course that's already like a loss of credibility, because they make the threat and then they can't carry through on it, which shows everybody else, oh, like why can't they carry through on that? Is it because they don't have the actual power to? And that is the case. Like NATO doesn't have the power to back up those demands, and so they can't enforce it, because you have Russia, especially Russia, providing strategic support on the other side. So it's like a war within a war within many, and they're happening in boardrooms right now. None of them have become hot on the continent, thank God, because the coups have happened, which have stopped it. But like, yeah, there's a diplomatic battle, that's for sure. So it was formed, like this is all recent as well. Like we're still on shaky ground. So it's only formed in September 23. And right now, we're going to go there. I shouldn't say that yet. But like Russia, just last week, Lavrov, literally 2 days ago, has returned to Russia from a 4-nation trip. And I think it was like literally 6 weeks after the date that Blinken just left Africa from the 4 nations that he chose to go visit. Like the timing of these things as well, when you start looking into it, like the Russians are extremely like specific, and they're even going to nations which are considered Western allies, but like Chad, for example, we're going to go to now. They're typically aided and funded and helped, and their leadership is propped by the French. But just recently, the former leader died in battle, Idris Deby, and so his son took over, and basically there's just a changing of the tide. They see more benefit in having a relation or having multiple relationships than just having one. So even the ones that are considered Western allies, they're now just because they can, and it's actually a really beautiful thing. But they're not, their ally to the West is not so strong anymore. I just have a nice quote here from Mr. Zain. He's the foreign minister for Niger, pretty sure. But he said, I can't be too provocative. This was in Kenya just recently. He said this at a AFDP meeting, African Development Bank. And he's right there in Kenya, like in a place which is maybe not the safest to say it, but that's the thing. Like it's open system at the moment. He's like, I can't be too provocative, but I want to ask ECOWAS to join AES. He's like, I can't be too provocative, but I'm just going to say it. There are ECOWAS countries that would probably want to join the AES because the culture of sovereignty and dignity of the continent exists within the AES, which I think is a bit of a cryptic statement too, because that for me is another way of saying like the past and the history and the sovereignty and the idea of the nation state or the former empires, the civilizational process is embedded here with us. Like we actually defend that African ideal, both in a Pan-African way, but also stemming from those former empires, because we are the countries that represent that empire, and we've been cut off from our traditional like economic avenues. And so now we, as three countries that are all landlocked, are going to come together as an alliance. There is talk right now of unionizing this alliance, like formally, okay, which would make these three countries the biggest country in Africa. Just to mention, that's a little side thing. If they were to do it, we're a little bit far to talk, but we are going to have fun at the end with that, because it would put pressure on the other nations surrounding them as well. We need economic integration. Basically, the goal is to have economic integration, so because the customs and the borders are a big problem for development and they slow things down. Republic of Chad. Chad was formed in the earliest parts of history due to Lake Chad and its basin being a place of prosperity. We spoke about that. It's a crossroads, a natural one, because there's water and it's a place where you can take rest, and it's not a small lake. For most Europeans, we consider it a sea. You can't see the other side. The Kanem-Bornu Empire was one of the legendary Sao civilization was there first, but they're not considered an empire, just a people. That's 600 years before Christ. Then the Kanem-Bornu Empire conquered the area and ruled the entirety from 700 to 1380. That was for Kanem, and then Bornu 1380 to 1900, where they moved across to the other side of the lake because there was a drought on one side. Colonized by France in 1920 before gaining back independence in 1960, only a 40-year period, but a lot was done. Due to significant underinvestment, because of the positioning of Chad being a landlocked nation, the French were just like, we don't really need this for anything. We just need it for resources. So we're not really, there was no development done. And the early years of independence were completely rife with corruption and bad governance, because the leadership, it was like the French, with a lot of the countries that didn't choose full independence, the French put their leader in first. So that's something to note when we look at the Pan-African period. There's the real ones, like the real ones who gained independence, who actually won it through a process, like legal process or a violent one. Or they were like given it, which means that they were propped into that position. And it's like, you're just going to keep serving me, right? So that was, in the case of Chad, that was the case. But again, we can understand, because based on the economic situation, like any character looking at that's like, well, what are you going to do with independence without any prosperity? Like you need someone to help you, and so they chose their former masters, because at the time, like I say, Russia, China, other great powers that we have now were just simply not in a place to. There were overtures, like there was military aid from Soviet Union. There were, but not like what we're going to talk about of Russia next, where I'm going to show you how much, because it's definitely not just military. That's what I want to really also tackle too. It's a very important nation for the supply of uranium. So that's why the French really wanted it. Okay, because nuclear power, French had like a whole thing, and they did amazing with developing nuclear power, and really good. Well done, France. but came at the expense of someone else. So this was the main reason for like maintaining good relations. And but recently they received a lot of diplomatic overtures from the Russian government, and Sergei Lavrov has made a visit just last week in the first week of June. And he went to Republic of Congo, Guinea, Burkina Faso, and Chad. So yeah, they all have strong diplomatic relations with Russia, especially Guinea and Congo for the past 60 years since independence. The other two do, like Chad, actually not so much. In independence, it was all French, and Burkina Faso too. But now, and especially like was for Burkina Faso since Sankara, he received aid from the Soviets because they were most of the time supporting the independence movement in a pragmatic way, but also in ways that were honest. Then we have the first president, Francois Tombalbaye. Well, he actually fought against the Nazis for the Free France organization under Charles de Gaulle. It's like when I found that out, I was like, oh my God, no way, it's crazy. So good guy, obviously. But he was installed, and like I say, like Chad was really, really poor and like still really, really poor. So like though he was an ally of the French, like he did have the best interests of his country at heart, and he wasn't altogether a bad guy. Like, you know, fighting against Nazis like that, we can already see from his character as a young person. But I would say he went more towards the Jacobin side. That's like a trap laid for some people often, and African leaders have often fallen into that trap. I'm going to talk of people like Julius and Nyerere, even people like Museveni and Kagame, but they're still around today. So we have to bend a little bit with this because when you have such little power, and yeah, like I say, when you got that on top of you, we do have to bend a little bit with these characters. There are some that are like absolute brilliant, like Kwame Nkrumah, but then we have some middle ones, and then we have the absolute awfuls. Then we have a Chadian civil war where Libya under Gaddafi tried to invade Chad. I'm not going to get into that. That is like I started on that. It's a whole class. Okay, it's a whole class. But it failed, and basically Gaddafi started it because the French left, and it left a vacuum. And Gaddafi was like, if I can think correctly, like he kind of think, oh, well, it's a vacuum. And like the leadership there certainly doesn't have the mandate to rule. I have a plan. I have a vision. And he is Pan-African, Gaddafi. He's working with the West, and there were CIA relationships and whatnot, and even Muslim Brotherhood and stuff like that too, with Turkey and Qatar. But like, lo and behold, he ended up a pretty good guy, and we had to remove him because he ended up a good guy. But in that time, it was a policy of pragmatism, and he was seeking Libya's own benefit and basically trying to expand. And he was doing, like, he was being told to do it, like, against the French. There's probably Americans, but like, yeah, there's even conflict between Western powers, like that they're using, like the French are using someone and the Americans using someone against each other. And we had that recently where America, like with Niger, like they tried to throw France under the bus so that they wouldn't lose their position in the country, but then they ended up both getting tossed out. So that's the thing about like the West, like we're not allied at all. We're like the first to do it to each other. Then you had Hissène Habré. He was a dictator. He was part of the rebel faction that took over. So he was part of the civil war, and there were three groups situated along the border, and he was the one that had enough funding and support from outside to take control, and he did. And France got back in control. And then we have Idriss Deby. Now, I've put him down as a patriot. Now, of course, he's still very much controlled by France, and he got elected 5 times, which, you know, it's obvious when you get elected 5 times that you weren't elected 5 times. But like, it's just to say, like, when they're pragmatic, that is a middle place, and he did a very good way of a very good policy of playing East and West, and he had good relationship. Like he started the process of building good relationships with the East, which allows for Chad to have the option it does now with joining the AES. And that's why Lavrov just went, because traditionally speaking, they're in the hands of the French, and all of their institutions are related to French universities, and all of the cultural linkages are with universities and all of the sports and stuff like that. So it's not just political. Like there are a lot of connections that keep these countries under their former masters, but because things just haven't gotten better, that is breaking. And then basically his son, so Idris Deby, he died in 2021 in the line of fire. He was actually fighting for his nation against jihadist insurgents that, of course, we know, well, Saudi and Qatar are funding those majorly. And that's also why Sudan broke up, and Obama's involved in that as well. So he did a very good job of keeping stability in Chad in a time where Sudan was attacking Chad from the east, and having just gone through like Gaddafi's attack too. It's amazing that Chad is still a nation. And especially when you consider that the issue they have with Boko Haram around Lake Chad right now, like it's really tentative. And I think that's basically why they're changing sides, is because they see that path doesn't go much longer before I think they're all seeing that, like it doesn't go much further before it starts to fall apart, because these insurgencies are getting to the point where you're going to have a Islamic caliphate set up in the Saharan region. And that's going to sit between Africa and Europe. And Europeans should be very worried about that, like in a serious way. So other issues are the consistent droughts that these areas have. This is because, by the way, since the 80s, we have had something called the Lake Chad Basin Commission, which was started and not started, but helped along by the LaRouche organization and the Schiller Institute and other organizations around the world that have done as much work as possible to platform this problem with Lake Chad being one of the largest sources of still water in the world. And it's drying up now for 30 years, and the West has refused to intervene in that natural process, or you could say unnatural, because so many people are depending off of it. It's just basically got into a vicious cycle where the nature or the natural circumstance can't keep on replenishing the water in that lake. So there are plans to build a canal from the Congo River, which floods yearly, to take 5% of the flow of that river and build a 2,000-kilometer canal to Lake Chad and refill it, and start a policy of prosperity and development in that region again that will, of course, eradicate terrorism. But I guess the West is not going to be able to do it now, because the credibility is lost, and our refusal to do it. And so now someone else is going to do it. One of the good things for Chad recently was they had discovered oil in 2000, and by 2003, they were already allowed to go and explore that oil and start developing it and pulling it out of the ground. They had help from Western corporations. So that has helped the economy. The economy has been growing at about 6% since like Deby took over. So like progress. That's also why I put him down as a patriot, even though he's still allied with his former master, but definitely making things better in Chad. And we see with his son, potentially there were already discussions between him and his son that, son, we need to change the tree that we're going to farm from, or the tree that we're picking from. Like, we need to change tree, we need to change who we're going to receive our goods. And basically, I think that when you take over, maybe Russia would be a good option. I don't know, I'm just hypothesizing, but I can imagine that would be a good father-son chat. And based on what is happening now, something that probably was spoken about before his father was shot in the line of fire. They are building also a pipeline to Cameroon. So I can't imagine that the West would have let that happen without some form of leverage that Chad was using. And it's that leverage that starts to allow African countries to get these projects done, which are actually going to lift them out of poverty. So that's 1,000-kilometer pipeline between Cameroon and Chad, and means that Chad can get its oil to the sea. Okay. because landlocked country, and no, like, great to have oil, but no point having it if you can't get it to the sea. So now, since 2000, they have that pipeline, and they have been able to transport oil. They can't refine it, but they can sell it. Then they had also the restoration of ties with Sudan. So that's what Deby did too in 2006. He restored ties with Sudan, and the civil wars and the infighting stopped. So this is something that like, a lot of Western people didn't even know this was going on. Like, since the 80s and 90s, Africa's been in a state of perpetual war. Okay. And it still is. Like, you still got like 8 to 12 conflicts on the continent right now. And I'm going to show you, like, and now it's turning into, like, like these caliphates and stuff, but this is a plan. It's not by coincidence. Okay. Senegal, once part of Ghana and Mali empires, we showed before. It became known as the Jollof Empire, like Wolof, 1350 to 1549. Then the Portuguese landed, and later the French. Over 1/3 of the population was enslaved between 1550 and 1900. Of course, the coastal regions got it worse. But there were also, it wasn't just slavery, there was also regional warfare. So in the break of those empires, of course, with the infighting, there was a lot of loss of life and passing of slaves and stuff like that. Actually, I was shocked to find out that in Mali, slavery was still legal up until something like 2005. And you still have an enormous amount of people in Mali that are officially enslaved. Like, you have a situation in Mali where in the north you have Arab masters, and in the south you have sub-Saharan Africans. And basically, with the conflicts that have happened in Mali over the years, there's a normalization of those Arabs enslaving the southern people living in Mali. And it has been, many leaders have tried to tackle the issue, but because it's so normalized now within the country, there seems to be even public pushback. I mean, we've had this in other civilizations too with slavery, where, like, we had that in America. Like, the North wanted the South to give up their slaves, and it created massive political problems because one side is building economics of slavery and the other side is building economics off of vision and, like, Republican ideals. It's just because that side, that barbaric economic machine, doesn't have the brain power to actually understand that you can make wealth another way. They're just literally missing an entire construct of the human soul. So I'm not excusing it. I'm just saying that that's kind of the problem. And there definitely needs to be a re-education in that sense. Like, when we've got a situation where people just don't understand something like that, there needs to be a re-education policy to show that not only is slavery just a bad thing, of course it is. I think even most people who are there understand that, but it's like, you got to build the economic system to basically annihilate that use of people, right? And America did it, and okay, yeah, a discussion for another time. Republic of Guinea, this is my last country. Whoa, 50 minutes. Guinea was originally part of the Ghana, Soso, Mali, and Songhai empires. So they're all part of these three. There was an Islamic state in Fouta Djallon in the mountains that was founded by the Fulani people. It never became a kingdom. It was just a peaceful Islamic state that existed high up in the mountains where it could be safe. But then it became it got absorbed by the Tukulur Empire. It got absorbed because there was a very good leader of the Tukulur Empire called Mansa Samori Touré. He is significant because he is the great-grandfather of the first independence leader of Guinea. Crazy, right? So, like, that's like a philosopher king lineage, and it's awesome, right? Because this Mansa Samori Touré, he's like one of the last major resistors of French colonization, and he fight the French over a period of 20 years and defeat them in like a multitude of battles. And he eventually, like, towards the end, he starts to lose, so he takes on a scorched earth policy where he's like, wherever the French go, I'm just going to burn it, so when they come, there's nothing to take, and it's the best chance I've got of them giving up. But even that didn't work, and eventually the French did get him, but only in 1898. So even 2 years after the Scramble for Africa conference in Berlin, the French still have a niggle that they got to sort out. And like, he was a real resistor, and like, what a strong like I wish I'd had the space to put a photo of him because he's beautiful as well and very just looks like a light, like a big bulb, and just full of wisdom, and like the strategies that he was using to defeat the French with like far less weaponry and like far less like technical standards, and really like just quite creative, like splitting up troops into tiny little forces, ambushing French, like massive French troops, like jumping out of ground, like all sorts of awesome things. And turns out the French actually, in the end, they had to use cannonballs. They had to actually bring in full-on artillery to beat him. Like, wow, that's kind of crazy when you think of the actual like weaponry we had against what they had, and we had to bring in cannons to beat them. Well, it's a little bit embarrassing. So Guinea regained its independence in 1958, and Guinea, I guess because of that essence from their former great grandfather, Guinea chose full independence. Okay, and so rather than joining the colonial sidestep, the French community, they were like, no, we're leaving. And then, of course, that's the thing. They proved to the rest that France is not really offering independence, because as soon as they left, France were like, boom, like, how dare you walk away from us by your own will? And they took everything out of the country, right? Like I was reading a memoir of one of the, like a French soldier, like they were ordered to take light bulbs. They were ordered to take like wiring. They were ordered to take like stationery, okay? Stationery. They were taking the construction plans for the sewage system in Conakry. Okay, they didn't leave a thing. Okay, like not even the plans, not even the blueprints that they had for like scaling up some of these cities. They took everything. That was the punishment. So like we've taken what we want, and now we're just gonna like, yeah, peace out. So Ahmed Sékou Touré he was elected. He is one of the great Pan-African leaders, great friends with Kwame Nkrumah. Going to tell a fun story on him. He died in the USA. That's some, like, I looked a little bit into that because he died from heart failure, and you know that thing with heart, you know, it's just that. So anyway, he was the great grandson of Mansa Samori Touré, the guy who resisted the French for like a good 20 years. And I think that's amazing. That like I had no idea that he's actually the great grandson of a former leader of the Tukulur Empire. Okay, so like we have lineage, even though we have this dark age period, we still have lineage. Like there's still intact family lineage which could lead the future too. And he did. So he became president in 58, and he stayed there till 84. And on first appearances, most people would be like straight, like, you know, Western people like dictator. But no, because of course, coming out of independence, you need rule and order, like law and order, and you need consistency with the rule. And even America didn't have term limits for a long time. They abolished it after Franklin Roosevelt. So once you've found a good leader, you probably wise to stick with them. And you know, it's not that God throws one every day. You know, we're not playing pinball here. Like you get one, and if you miss your mandate, you miss your chance. Well, the wave will come again. There's probably wave 9 or 10, but you're gonna have to wait. And that's kind of the, like you see with these countries also, when they miss the window, God, does it get bad after? I think that's like something for all nations to reflect on. Like if we miss the window, it's gonna get bad. Like when you're handed the opportunity to walk through the door and then you pick evil, well, you know, you picked evil. So it's just that thing. Like, and people say, I didn't, like, you know, it's like, yeah, but you're part of the nation, and you're like, you're a part of it, you're part of the manifest destiny. So yeah. That's where we as people need to be developed in politics enough so that we can actually genuinely support our leaders, not through populism or like, you know, cheap quotes, but actually understand the vision of what they're trying to bring about and implement in those nations or within that border, and be a part of what I'd call a true reconciliation and salvation process, where you're actually like with Roosevelt's fireside chats, where you're telling the people week in, week out what we're doing, where we're going, how we're doing it, so that nobody can interfere in that process and stymie it, and something that maybe leaders in the future will practice in Africa, like more direct connection with their people, and not allowing foreign media also to to be the parapet for them, or to be the spokesperson. So then after him, we had another patriot, but of course he was couped by the military after 1 week. So as soon as we got Toure, like as soon as Toure died in America, opportunity arose, because he was a strong man and had the backing of Kwame Nkrumah and other great Pan-African leaders. And so it was very hard to remove him, and he consolidated rule. And also things were getting better in the country because he had, like, they started good relationship with Russia. He visited like countries like Yugoslavia, President Tito, and Romania when they were like still kind of like decent, and was getting like quite a lot of aid. And like already, we're going to talk a bit about the economics after of Russia, but like, for example, in Guinea, Rusal, which is one of the largest aluminium producers in the world, has had a relationship with Guinea in bauxite, because bauxite makes aluminium. Bauxite developed like mining for now like over 30 years, and they've had diplomatic relationship with Guinea for like 60 years, and that was started with Toure. And as we can see here, like the coup d'etats were basically, we wanted to destroy that relationship, and but it failed. So because also Guinea had full independence, I guess I can say that we couldn't interfere the way we could with the countries that were part of the French community, for example, because Guinea had its own currency. They had their own, like the institutions were Guinean, even if individuals were still corrupt. At least the institutions were formated by them. And yeah. So Beivodjui, who came in after, he came in through succession. He was like Touré's right-hand man, but he was couped like within a week. Actually, even before he could really take the presidency, the military junta already like moved him out of the way. And it's pretty clear that was a foreign intervention right there. So then we had Conte come in, who ruled like a dictator from 84 to 2008. He like worked for his lackeys. That's why he was put in to replace Toure. So it started out well and very quickly goes bad. Camara was another coup, military junta. Actually, I couldn't get enough on him to decide, but I think he's more on the patriot side, because really like America and NATO were like so against him taking over, and he was only there for a year, and one of his actual bodyguards tried to shoot him. And I think basically there was like the potential of the change that's just happened in 21 going to happen, because it's coming through the military normally in these countries. Like the honor and the actual relationship with the people is closer between the military than with the political elite. And Camara already, I think, tried, but was like sidestepped immediately. Even had an assassination attempt on him even before he was going to like try and even run for president. He hadn't even really set up elections yet. And it also, it was apparent to me that Konate was definitely the Western choice. And later on became chairman of the African Union. And he was backed career-wise very much by the West. And then Alpha Conde. So I put Konate and Conde as neutral because, well, even though they're backed by the West, there was progress made, and the economy got better, and the relationship with Russia was never ended. So they've done very well in balancing the scales, and it's worked really well for their economy, because I'll tell you a little bit more about that project with Rusal. But it's a really high-end technology project, and it is something that's so good for Guinea, and it's a very good thing for the future. So yeah, the highlights I'd put down there: economic growth and a 60-year relationship with Russia. Like Guinea actually has had some pretty consistent economic growth, and yeah, it's led to the situation today, which is not a bad one. Like they have options, more options than the rest, because of that independence, and now because of that relationship with Russia. But just to say, Doumbouya recently did say, the Mamadi Doumbouya, who's the current leader, and I've got to look at him more, because his wife is still a serving member of the French National Police. She's a serving member of the gendarmerie, and it's a bit strange. And like, yeah. Anyway, he has, quote, said, we are not pro-China or anti-China. We are not pro-West or anti-West. We are not pro-Russia or anti-Russia. We wish to be friends with everybody. That's the general policy right now. That there is a potential that Guinea is going to join AES. I'm going to give you some little intel soon at the end that I found on Twitter, where apparently the Guineans have allowed the AES to use their coastline for the port entry to those countries. Okay. So that's one such thing, because Mauritania refused the AES countries access to its ports to receive their commerce through the sea, because that's the only way you can. So right now, and the only two countries that are allowing the AES to receive their trade, which was going on before and is supposed to keep on going, but all of the ECOWAS countries shut off their border, apart from Togo, who's part of ECOWAS, and Guinea, who's not part of ECOWAS. So Guinea could anyway. So that's just something important to note. Okay. So why and how the USA, France, plus the G5 failed. The G5 is the name given for those 5 countries. I'll quickly pop forward and back again to show you. Oh, where was it? Oh, it was 2 back. So this map here, this one that we have here, in green, these were what is formerly G5. G5 is now defunct. It's fallen apart because the 3 in the middle left. So it left the outsiders, Chad and Mauritania, a little bit like, pie in the sky. So they were like, well, it's it kind of ended by default, right? Like once those 3 had left, you've got this massive gap in the middle where how are these 2 going to be able to maintain the activity that France and USA are conducting on this territory? It just became, it got defaulted by these 3 leaving. So G5 ended very, very quickly. So now coming back to here, since the G5 creation in 2014, February, the amount of terrorist events in the region has grown exponentially. In 2014, fatalities continent-wide were on the rise and required. That's the thing, they required international help. It's not they didn't need help. So the intention's good that the West goes in and help, but then they don't help. The situation got worse while the West was there, which is crazy, because it's like, this is NATO. How are terrorists expanding in a desert where there's nowhere to, you can assume that there's not many places to hide. We have all of this geomapping technology. How is it that these enormous groups of people hoarding enormous amounts of weaponry are able to do this pretty much under people's noses? So since that G5 help came, between 2014 and 16, I'll be honest, the fatalities decreased, as you'd expect. But then since then, there's been a huge resurgence. So I think it's that thing, like the part of the plan is like, go in, show them that, we can get rid of this, but then all of a sudden it starts to grow again. And then it starts to be used as a controlling factor on the political factions of those countries, starts to be used as like another pressure valve. So it has the appearance of a transfer of one policy from one region to another, using the deserts as a cover for the transport of such activity. Bear in mind, when you go all the way from Afghanistan to the Sahara region, there are parts along that travel that are like almost unwatched. Like some of these deserts, like the borders are so vast in Chad and Niger and Mali, for example, there's no border guards. Like there's nobody there. Like the conditions anyway are too hot and too arid for anybody to be there for like a long period of time. And the infrastructure is not set up to support human life there for long periods of time. So it's not easy for these nations to monitor their borders. So that's something that really needs to be understood, because maybe people are thinking like, oh, like how is the West like, transporting terrorists from one place to another? And it's like, well, okay, maybe they're not doing it like directly like that, but if you're opening the path, if you're creating the space for it to happen, you're doing it. These nations, Mali, Mauritania, and Niger especially, they have large open swaths of desert, and it's impossible to monitor, like I said. Genuine lack of interest in delivering a clear victory against these rebel groups. Too much time given for these groups to organize a mass amounts of advanced weaponry and finding its way into these regions. I actually was looking in 2012, when the problem was already there. There were American commanders already in Senegal. And when they were asked by media reporters of why they weren't intervening already in what was already looking like a problematic situation, they said, sex trafficking and drug trafficking are not big enough problems for us to intervene. Okay, so there you go. That was the answer of the NATO, like bobbleheads. Like it's just not a big enough problem. Like we're just gonna sit here in Senegal, just like out of the region, and just like watch the theater, So genuine lack of interest in delivering a clear victory. It's been 10 years running. And as you can see from the maps on your left there, problem not going away. Definitely not. So in 2018, Burkina Faso has very small amount, like, compared to 21 and 22, very small amounts of terrorist activity. And now Burkina Faso, last year, Burkina Faso is #1 in the world for terrorist-related incidents. I'm going to show you another map soon, which is shocking. Locals report of human rights abuses by occupying forces as well. So not only are we, aiding terrorists and abetting them in these regions, we're also hurting the local populations. And that's probably causing more extremism because, now they just hate us. So then also that leaves the relationship between the national military and the local populace in a very bad situation, which is a bad strategic situation for maintaining law and order and control so that you can know who's who, causing loss of civilians and loss of soldiers because of the confusion that is often happening and I saw parts where like attacks were happening and French forces were literally walking away and leaving the national forces to deal with the situation alone. So just like really shocking levels of malfeasance and like lack of intent to intervene, like complete lack of intent. Like I wasn't aware that it was so bad, like so obvious as well. So proxies, as we know through many other classes that we've all done, proxies have long been used in Southeast Asia, and the Sahel looks to be the next in the line of succession. It's also probably being used as policy to control Europe a bit. And it's a continuance and expansion on the war of terror, which now today we know mostly this war on terror, even though it was a genuine cause, it has been turned into a mountain out of what was not as big as what it is now in the 70s and 80s. France and USA have been overtly interfering in the politics of African nations for decades now, leading to political instability and corruption of many public leaders, which does not help fighting terrorism, I'm afraid. It's not going to make the military any stronger, and it's not going to secure those borders when we keep on changing the leadership and creating confusion and disparity between certain people within the political arena. We need to have cohesion in the political arena, even if there's a fight, even if there's debate, there needs to be some level of national cohesion, that they agree on the common problems and they start figuring those out as a people. Finally, the credibility and the trust in the G5 and Western military power has waned due to insufficiency in defeating its own proxy. Or was that the plan all along? So I'll say that also with the collapse in Afghanistan and with the failure in Syria and the failure in Iraq and the way that also they started to be pushed out of the Southeast Asia region recently, with Iraq formally submitting a request for America to leave, actually succeeding in getting the Americans to leave. A lot of these nations in the Sahel region look at that and they go, well, it appears that the West cannot provide security anyway. This is just the reality. It's not even a political choice anymore. It's a reality, and NATO simply can't provide that security. It's apparent, especially when you are helping finance the problem. So terrorism deaths in Africa's Sahel spiked 2,000% in 15 years. This must just be a coincidence as well. 43% of all terrorism-related fatalities in 2022 were in the Sahel region, where 22,074 people have been killed in 6,408 terror attacks between 2007 and 22. For now, in 22, 4 out of the 10 countries most affected by terrorism in the world are in the Sahel. The region population of about 135 million is being affected by this. And 12 out of the 20th deadliest attacks in the world were in the Sahel. Burkina Faso has become the most dangerous place in the world for terrorism, based on the point. There's a scoreboard for this. I'm going to show you in a moment. So those are just some of the reasons. And those are the big reasons for why the West and G5, France and America especially, have lost credibility. And actually, just today, it was announced that the first grouping of American military servicemen have got on the first and second plane today, leaving Niger. So it is happening. The 1,000 troops that are currently stationed, 1,100 troops that are currently stationed in Niger will be gone by September. That is the agreement. And like I said, when it all broke out, and diplomatically, originally, the Americans tried to throw the French under the bus so that they wouldn't have to leave. Very quickly, the Nigerian officials pulled the Americans in diplomatically and told them, no, it's you also. And they told them also it will be done by September. And it's interesting because the Americans up until now are actually collaborating. But I would be surprised if it, continues. So next page. Here we have some more diagrams to show you the extremity of the situation. So this is the number of active militant groups on the left here that are currently active in Africa. And then down here, we have a graph of fatalities in Africa by year. I'll just give you a moment to look at it. So Islamic State, like ISIS, has somehow spread into the Sahel region and been able to set up, even though we've been there since 2012. And then over here, we have a graph of the increase in deaths. The 5 of the 10 nations worst affected by terrorism are all in Africa. Like this in 2000, 2010. So how it got like this is really worth everybody asking that question of how did Burkina Faso's incidents of terrorism in 22 go from this? It's more than 100% increase in 1 year. That's pretty drastic. That's a big problem, and it is not that far from Spain. It is not. The Mediterranean is a very small sea. Now Israel, of course, we all understand why, but then Mali is third on the list. Why Mali? Is coincidence again, or is something going on here? Why Burkina Faso and Mali, who are now part of the AES? And then guess what? Who's next? Niger. Right on cue. It's amazing, right? So of course they leave. Of course they leave the G5. I mean, you'd have to be a nutter not to leave the G5, actually. You'd have to be completely, under a complete illusion or just completely corrupted, to not leave this group that is completely failing in its intention to defeat terrorism. Terrorism's growing like by more than 100% in a whole year. I mean, it makes me shudder. So, instability in the G5 Sahel. This is fatalities per violent incident in yellow. Let's look. Where is the yellow? Can't see the yellow because it's behind all the purple, which is in 2019, right? Yeah, because it's getting worse, like everywhere, like in Chad, Niger. Look at Mali and Burkina Faso. It's like almost an entire caliphate already is erupt, like just like what happened almost like 10 years ago now in Syria, or like started to, before the Russians intervened and saved the world from that scourge. We're gonna go next slide. This is the official terrorism index. So in the top left, that was for the year 2014. Iraq was number one, I mean, that all makes sense. Like, can anybody find Burkina Faso on that list? Can anybody find Niger on that list? Is Mali on the list? Then it's just one. There's like Nigeria. You got Nigeria, Kenya, Egypt, Libya. Libya makes sense because, of course, 2011, 3 years prior, we had created a no-fly zone over the country, murdered Gaddafi, and then set off the rivaling factions fighting against each other, and they're still doing that up until now, with all sorts of international powers now involved. But none of the countries that are in the G5 that became part of the G5 in 2014 were on this list in 2014. And then in 2023, all of the countries, bar Chad and Mauritania, so all of the middle countries are in, well, Burkina and Mali are in the top 5, and Niger rounds out the top 10. If that is not the definition of failure, I don't know what is. I just don't know what is. That is a strategic, political, military mess up of profound proportions. And this is not in a jungle, this is in a desert. This should not be that hard with the geomapping and all the technology that we have nowadays, the way that we are able to regime change people, the way that we have been able to sculpt things in our order. We cannot keep this at bay. I don't believe it. I refuse to. It is not, cannot be real. Now let's go on to more positive stuff. How Russia is helping the AES and African nations. I'm going to pull up an article here to help me along with this, because I found a brilliant one. Because I don't want to just talk about military anymore. I just want to talk about the bright stuff, because that's the thing. It appears sometimes that it's just military things, but we need the military because we need a strategic situation to be so strong that so that we can develop the economy. Like you need the political to be strong so that the economy can develop. So we've got strategically military technical agreements to train and aid in defeating terrorism. We've got the arms, transfer of essential arms specific in the aims of defeating terrorism. Remember, Russia has first-hand experience with defeating terrorism. They've been doing it now for over almost like 2 decades. Even before that, they were fighting Mujahideen. But I'd say in a good way, like in a really organized and effective way, they've been defeating terrorism for now 15, 20 years. And they've been defeating the proxies that have been set up, and they have been slowly basically cleaning up the mess that has been made. So that leads to then diplomatic and political organization once you've settled the chaos of the strategic situation, where they're arranging discussions and summits amongst those nations and providing support in the international arena so that that process cannot be intervened with. Information and media, essential, because Africa's information and media is completely in the Western throes. So they're increasing the presence of own national media that provides a more global perspective on world events. So TASS, RT, Sputnik Global are all present in Africa and have headquarters there. RT is in Nairobi, for example. While also providing local jobs to news anchors and journalists, which is great for the economy too. And RT, like I remember like a few years ago, they put out an advert for like for finding African journalists. So it's not like they're bringing Russian journalists to Africa. They find local journalists and they support them and give them a job, which is great. Then energy. This is where it gets to the fun part. This is the part I like, the economics. Oil, gas, and mining exploration for national development, commercial exploitation, and further development of the nation state. So yes, which leads to nuclear, which would lead to having the money to do nuclear and the expertise, because yeah, you need serious expertise and training provided for nuclear energy development. Russia has the accreditation to help nations develop such science and technology because it's very sticky when it comes to nuclear, as we see with Iran. This is why China and Russia want America to sign a deal with Iran again, because, well, Iran deserves to develop its nuclear power, and to develop its nuclear technology. And right now with the sanctions policy, it's very hard to do that. So, that's the case for any country who would have enough power to do what Iran wanted to do, which is develop nuclear. Like, well, if they would even think about trying without at least the backing of like Russia, America, or China, no, they wouldn't be allowed to. And on the map here, it's great. I love this map. It actually came from a Western article, but whatever. And it's brilliant because it shows active military deployments. So we all have heard of the Wagner Group. Initially, it was the Wagner Group. I don't know if it still is. I haven't heard a lot about the Wagner Group in Africa for a long time. It seems to me that the Defense Ministry has gobbled up that collective. And maybe anyway, in its first instance, it was being used as a proxy itself, so that the footing in those countries didn't seem too bold on the part of Russia and just seemed like an independent organization. But then eventually it's absorbed by the Russian government and the Russian Defense Ministry anyway. And we all know what happened with the leader of the Wagner Group, who that could have all been theater. It's still unclear, or it was the power got to his head. But either way, probably from the top, the whole thing was foreseen and then used to get a presence in certain countries and to start the process of strategically helping these countries secure their borders. And without like using a proxy to do it, now very quickly, it's the Russian Defense Ministry that's going to Niger. It's the Russian Defense Ministry that's going to have talks with Burkina Faso, and it's Lavrov, the Foreign Ministry, who's going to do all the diplomatic work too. And then you got the next badge is the arms transfers. So Niger's received, Mali's received, Chad hasn't yet, Nigeria has, Togo has, Algeria has, and then we have more arms transfers, like different sizes basically. That's different sizes, different amounts. So the ones with the big, they're like getting like a lot of Russian weaponry, whereas the ones with without the border. And then we've got Russian-backed media cooperation agreements where they allow for each country to have different information providers work in Russia and work in the respective country. That's bilateral. Then information operations, oil and gas projects is the DRIP. Mining ventures, nuclear power plants. And so we see from this map, there is a lot of activity across the entire continent. It's not specified, even to what we'd say like Western allied nations. Russia's still going to them and trying, and it is working. Like in the best of all possible worlds, like Africa can choose right now their partners for each specific thing, because they do have a lot of leverage because of this great power game that's going on. It's I'm starting to come to the conclusion that it's benefiting Africa eventually most. But yeah. So I'm going to talk a bit about Lavrov. The minister now speaks with Africa almost every week. In January, he met with representatives from the Algerian Minister of Foreign Affairs. In February, with colleagues from Egypt, Mali, and South Africa. In March, Nigeria and Namibia. In May, Sierra Leone. He also met with the King of Eswatini. It's worth noting that Sergei Lavrov often easily finds common language with African colleagues. Remember, many of these Africans in the political elite, they have studied in Russian universities. There is a Patrice Lumumba University in Russia. So that's something else. When you've been providing educational platforms for people, for political elites for a long time and their sons and daughters, that's a smart move. At some point, you feel like part of the family, and they start to have brotherly relationships. And when you've been educated together and you sat in class together and stuff like that, of course, those relationships don't just die. And yeah. The current head of Sierra Leone's Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Timothy Kaba, is a graduate of the St. Petersburg Mining University. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the Republic of Congo, Jean-Claude Gakoso, studied at St. Petersburg State University, which was known as the Leningrad University. And then we talk about diplomatic efforts. Russian embassy just opened in Equatorial Guinea last year. It also just opened in Burkina Faso, I think in March. And Burkina Faso reopened their embassy in Moscow. It had been closed for 13 years due to insufficient funds. Maybe Russia helped them with the funds, who knows? I don't know where those funds suddenly came from, but wrapping up the tour, like the most recent tour that Lavrov did, I'm going to show you another map soon of all the tours he did. But he wrapped up in Chad, where they have just reactivated a whole lot of discussions. I want to talk also about agriculture exports. I'm sure people remember reading about the grain and the fertilizer that Russia sent to Africa, because according to the West, based on the Black Sea grain deal failing, apparently the whole of the world was supposed to go into food shortage or something. That was the mouthpiece, right? Well, it didn't happen. And it's a complete farce. It never happened. And Russia actually provided 30,000 tons of fertilizer to Kenya, not to mention like over 155,000 tons of grain to different respective African countries. And they provided that grain to the poorest ones, obviously, as you would if you didn't want to have a food shortage. So like really smart, the way they go around that messaging as well, and the way they prove so quickly that messaging to be false. Our lies don't run long anymore. So the actual agriculture exports rose 25% compared to the previous year. Lavrov said, over the past year, our exports to Africa have increased by a quarter, reaching nearly 6 billion, with 80% of that being wheat. So brilliant. And Moscow is also increasing its food purchases from Africa. So maybe people were starting to think like, oh, it sounds like it's all going Russia's way. It's like, no, hold your horses. Russia has increased its imports to $2.1 billion in 23 from the African continent. That's just agriculture. In February, Moscow successfully completed the delivery of 200,000 tons of free wheat to each Burkina Faso, Zimbabwe, Mali, Somalia, Chad, and Eritrea. Well, Chad, Mali, and Burkina Faso, they're essential to this class, and you can understand why they received free grain. That was just like a, hey guys, how you doing? Evgeny Primakov, head of Rosotrudnichestvo, that was hard. The Cultural Support and Humanitarian Cooperation Agency highlighted the issue of food security during the session and noted that the agency plans to hold a conference. Finally! Oh my God. Like, LaRouche PAC has been calling on the West to hold a conference on food security in Africa for like 30 years now. Like, I'm reading the EIR intelligence reports going back to 78. 78. Then there was another call in 86. Then there was another one in 92. Then every 6 years we're making a call for like a conference on food security, and it never happened. It's like, oh my God. So this guy who runs Primakov, I should say, runs a cultural support and humanitarian cooperation agency, highlighted this issue and noted that the agency plans to hold the conference. The date is still to be set, but it will probably happen this year, and it's a very exciting development. All of Africa will be invited, and they plan to hold it specifically in Ethiopia because Russia understands the significance of Ethiopia being the only major non-colonized state other than Liberia in Africa. So there was a Russia-Africa summit last July in 2023. Big deal. Things have not slowed down. They've only gotten quicker since then. I've spent the past week catching up on everything. you try and stay in the loop, and I do. But even staying in the loop, I was aware of what was going on, and it's not until you go down the rabbit hole that you realize, like, oh my God, there is so much more going on, because the diplomatic activity it's daily. So since that event, the leaders of three countries, South Sudan, Equatorial Guinea, and Chad, they all visited Moscow individually since the Russia-Africa side. So since July 23 last year, which is like, what are we? We're June. It's not even a year. It's like 10 months. Three already went to Moscow. They already went back. They're like, no, it wasn't enough. I got to come back. Like, I want time alone with you. I don't want to be with the others, like I want some like personal time. Like, can we sit one-on-one? So great. Like, that's awesome because, everybody knows what that means. And then a delegation from Niger, headed by Prime Minister, also visited Moscow. So let's talk about Burkina Faso. Like, just quickly, we'll go through each country and Russia's intervention there. I'm an hour and a half in, and I'm going to round this up. But the Russian embassy reopened last December, 5 months after Traore came in. He went to St. Petersburg and reopened the embassy there, which was closed in 92. Lavrov said relations have never been better. Quote, our relations have a good history. They are based on mutual sympathy, trust, and mutual respect. Contacts are very intense at all levels. Thank you very much for our effective assistance in resolving issues that allowed us to resume the activities of our embassy in Ouagadougou. That's the capital of Burkina Faso. The Traore responded saying he was satisfied with the frank and honest relationship with Russia. Then with Chad, Lavrov said, Chadian friends will convey their wishes regarding the forms of interaction and sectors of their economy where they deem the presence of Russian economic operators useful. I love that language. They will tell us how we are needed. He noted the significant experience of Russian companies in handling infrastructure projects, citing Russian railways as an example. He noted that the Russian railway company already operates in many African countries, preparing projects for the creation of railroads and associated infrastructure. That's great news. Then he said, President of Chad, Mahamat Idris Deby, showed particular interest in the peaceful use of nuclear energy. Remember, I told you Chad has uranium, but they've never been able to refine it and use it for their own good. It's always gone to Areva in France. So Rosatom, the state corporation for Russian nuclear energy, has already gained in cooperation with African and other countries, being one of the leaders in peaceful nuclear energy technology. That was Lavrov's quote. End. Our security collaboration is developing. Cooperation in military and military technical areas is also developing. So that kind of goes hand in hand with the nuclear. It's like he's saying, without saying it, like, well, obviously that's developing too, because that, like, we wouldn't be able to go and do this without that. It's kind of a bit like also we're telling the West what we're doing. It's that thing of like, well, we're warning you and you can get on board whenever you want, but this is happening whether you like it or not. I guess we are going to get on board. Yeah, I mean, I guess maybe not. Maybe in the end we lose all of us. Time. I see Jerry. Jerry's not so sure. So the visit by President Chad Mahamat Deby is quite significant. It is significant because, like I said, Chad was in the throes of and in the handle of the French, but the son of the former leader he just went to Russia not 9 months after already going for the summit. So
hey Nick, your sound just dropped off a little bit.
Oh yeah?
Yeah, I don't know. Did you do anything? Did you shake your computer or something? Or
No, that's probably, those pesky intelligence agencies. Like,
so much better. So much better.
See, they're letting us back. All I had to do was say. So, yeah, it's a really good, really great thing that's happening because, like I say, Chad was very much a French nation, and even the opposition group, that's something also I didn't mention before. Even the opposition groups, a lot of them are supporting this new overture from Russia. So we have political unity on this too. which like we haven't seen that like that in a lot of these countries that's never happened. So that's what happens when a great power comes along. Like it does change people, and even the bad ones, the pragmatism in them goes, well, this is good for me too. So that's the thing about good things. It's good for everybody. It saves the evil as well. Secondly, Chad is a relatively new partner for Russia in Africa. During negotiations, it was mentioned that this was the first visit of the president of Chad to Moscow since 1980. That's pretty significant. And that's not a coincidence, he said. Up to this point, contacts between Russia and Chad on both the political and economical levels had been limited to one-time deals in the field of military technical cooperation. So literally one-time meeting, and that was it. No other discussions in the decades prior to that, like or after. So incidentally, Russia managed to establish rather close security contacts with almost all of Chad's neighbors. So regional security was an important topic during the negotiations with Chad too. This is maybe why Chad went, because they saw Mali, Mauritania, Burkina Faso form the AES, and then Chad's going to Russia to be like, what do you think we should do? Like, do we join there or do we not? Are you going to help us? Can you figure out the diplomatic problems for us? Because of course, all of our institutions are related to France. Can we replace some of those relationships with universities that you have? So on and so forth. So the trade, just to make that clear, the trade with Chad they were in the bottom 10 for Russia of African countries. It was only $2 million of trade between Russia and Chad in 21. So yeah. So just to wrap Chad up, while Chad doesn't currently stand for getting rid of French troops, the need for them may gradually disappear once Chad's foreign relations diversify to include China, Russia, Turkey, and the UAE, right? So the internal political situation is stabilizing, and the region establishes now effective security mechanisms based on that stabilization. Bear in mind also, Russia already has several thousand troops stationed in CAR, just below Chad, Libya, up just above Chad, and Sudan to the east of Chad. So yeah, at some point Chad's a bit like, well, I guess we need to go to Russia. So that's why they did. And now a little bit on Guinea. During his visit to Guinea, because I said to you about the aluminium of Guinea, Guinea has bauxite, which is it's like really valuable, and we're going to need a lot of it for the future. And the continent's going to need a lot of it for infrastructure development, because aluminium, like how essential. And they don't want to buy it from like the West or Russia or China. Like they want to manufacture it and produce it on the continent, right? Like that's how you're going to have auto manufacturing. Be that kind of economic colonialism. So Lavrov met with his counterpart, Morisanda Kouyaté, and traditional president Mamadi Doumbouya, current leader, to discuss prospects for economic and military technical cooperation, as well as in the field of medicine. Guinea stands out as one of the leaders on the continent by the volume of accumulated Russian investments due to Rusal projects for bauxite mining and alumina production. So the visit is also important in the context, despite being a country from which a series of coups started in 19, they had a bunch up until 21. Guinea has adopted a less anti-Western stance and has not expressed intentions to withdraw from ECOWAS or join the AES. They're very much playing a careful game right now of neutrality, and I'd say it's a smart one, actually. It was the only coup belt country that didn't go to the Russia-Africa summit. They didn't go, which is real interesting, because they have this massive cooperation in bauxite development and for a long time now, but somehow they didn't go. And I've even speculated that Lavrov is but advising some of these leaders, like, maybe don't sit too close to me or like look too cozy with me, because it'll just create you problems. And honestly, it's too bold a move right now. So let's, we talk about things, but we're not going to formalize anything yet, because we need still we need the meadow to bloom, and we can't go and harvest until everything's bloomed. It's just kind of like this. So just example about the Russian company Rusal, it's the world leader in aluminium industry with nearly 5.5% of the global aluminium production. And it's present in Guinea. It has 4,000 employees in Guinea, which is like massive for creation of like good jobs because they're good paying jobs doing that. And yeah, it's strengthened by Russia's role. So it's great for them. Let's go next slide. So this is the map of all the diplomatic activity since 2022. So the ones that are marked in yellow are the places that he visited. Lavrov, the foreign ministry, not just Lavrov, he took the whole foreign ministry with him. Like each time he takes like a good 12 delegates as well. So when I look at the pictures and the photos, it's a crowd. It's not a trio. So when they run those meetings as well, it's not just a bunch of people sat at one table. There's multi-level meetings all the way throughout the day, like in separate rooms before they come to that one table. We as public only see the big table, the banquet. But of course, throughout the whole day, from like since like 6 in the morning, they've been having breakfast and talking to their respective counterpart, and so that they can get ready for that big meeting where they're only going to talk about the important stuff later. He went to South Africa 3 times in 23. It's notable, being that South Africa just this year, no, was it in 23? Yeah, it's in 23 that a new era of international relations. I was going to do a whole slide on China's economic interventions too, but I did not have time. But that would have been fun because it's almighty exciting to actually see what's being built right now, this very day. Oh, little thing. China. Oh, well, Matt already told you that. Matt stole that from me. He told you that in the email, which is that China recently handed back the management of the 2 railways in Kenya and Ethiopia back to those respective nations. And so that's a brilliant thing that completely puts the whole debt trap narrative as a lie, another one, because one of the lies of that narrative was that we were going to force all these nations to take these loans to build these vanity projects, and then China was going to use the control of those projects and the control of those ports and train lines to control their economies and to stop them from there was all just kind of like a front. But it turned out they've proved them wrong. They've actually handed the management back. So just to round this up, Africa was formerly a continent of great empires. We should always remember that, bear it in mind. Their ruin and division led the way for colonization, albeit with fierce resistance. Colonial powers ruled harshly and treated the people with indignation. This led the way for independence again, because we lost our credibility. The 1950s and 60s was the wave of independence that spread across the continent, given a strong push of support from JFK, our last great leader, who was a full-on Pan-Africanist. He had Kwame Nkrumah visit the White House as the first foreign leader to come to America. We had people like Paul Robeson, who Matt has done a class on. We have Kwame Nkrumah, Modibo Keita, and Ahmed Sekou Toure, who was the great-grandson of the Mansa Samori Toure. The Soviet Union and China also gave valuable support, even though their own nations were in a state of crumbling for the former or upheaval and rebuilding for the latter. But we've also done classes on those, and we've seen how colonization also affected them. China, of course, with its coastline, but also Russia financially in the 90s with with the input of Boris Yeltsin. There you go. The name was lost to me for a moment. During the first half century of independence, the situation has been chaotic. Colonial powers refuse to release their grip on the economic and financial sphere in Africa and routinely instigate regime change and assassinations. That's in case anybody needs to know why it hasn't progressed. So Russia and China have re-emerged as global powers capable of taking on the Western hegemony globally, politically, strategically, and economically. You've got Russia basically providing the strategic security for these nations to change their allegiance. And then you've got China providing the capital and the economic power in the way that they can help them rebuild their economies, or at least the foundation of their economies, so that they can start developing to become fully independent nation states. So that is all for today, everybody. I've done my utmost in getting everything out of my brain in some sort of order. And thank you very much for listening. And yeah.
Thank you so much, Nick. And that's not quite true because we still need to get that class from you on China and all of the work that China is now doing in Africa, which definitely is a class on its own. Standard is out of presenter view, right? It's not looking like that though. Oh, you have to stop sharing, Nick, right? If we want to just have everybody's face show up. So first on the list for questions is Kevin Champagne. He has an excellent question for you.
Hey Nick, great talk. Very interesting and very thorough, I gotta say. So I'm just gonna read what I wrote. Basically, I may have another question later, but I'm gonna keep it for later. So you mentioned Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso left ECOWAS in January of 2024. But there's also something else that happened in January 2024, which was that Egypt and Ethiopia joined BRICS. And so I just collected some thoughts underneath, and I wanted to know what you think about it. So what could come to the kind of like in the right conclusion that there is a westward land-based economic push from the east. This in turn is putting pressure towards the coast, or in other words, toward the western maritime colonies of ECOWAS. I'm sorry for all the noise. What do you think of this assessment? And in a bigger picture, what kind of role will BRICS play in the region that you talked about? Because you were focused pretty much solely in the western part of Africa. But what do you think of the role of BRICS here? And can you talk a little bit about maybe the BRI and what they're doing to join East and West in Africa?
Yeah. Well, the inclusion of Egypt and Ethiopia into BRICS was essential. Now, actually, out of the 10 nations that are a part of BRICS, 4 of them are on the African continent. 3 of them. So you got Ethiopia, Egypt, and South Africa, and it's significant. Like they are. Ethiopia is significant, of course, because it's one of the only countries that was never colonized. So as the cultural like the sovereignty lies with them, and that's why the African Union, the headquarters of it, were put in Addis Ababa. Bear in mind that it was the Chinese that built the African Union headquarters. So that was not coincidence. That was done by choice. And the inclusion of Egypt and Ethiopia into BRICS was done by choice at the same time as the AES was being formed as well. This is a choice. And so you should understand that right now in Sudan, we have a conflict between North and South, and Russia supports the Rapid Support Forces. And basically, that whole conflict started out because Russia had an agreement to build a military base in the Red Sea in the port of Khartoum in Sudan. And then shortly after that agreement was made, the conflict and the coup broke out. And that was a split in the military. So basically one side stay with the West and the other side go with Russia, because there was already an agreement in place with the former president who got unseated, Bashir. So, and that was Obama. I can't remember exact years, like 2016 or something, that Sudan got split into South and like Sudan and then South Sudan. So basically, I would say that what you have is you've got the formation, like BRICS is organizing Ethiopia and Egypt because there were problems there as well with the building of the Gerd Dam between those two. And now they're in BRICS together. That will bring them closer together, and their interests should co-align with the organization by the other group, by the other nations. But I think that there is an intention to not that these are going to become like one, like that it's going to become like one big block across the top of Africa. Like that's really not like necessary or an intention of Russia. I truly think the intention of Russia and China is to lift Africa to a place where it is capable of acting independently. And so to do that, they do need to make these countries strategically strong. So joining organizations like BRICS is a natural procession. You need to be part of international organizations to have support and to be able to act independently. Like for Ethiopia, which as a kid I was being told that Ethiopia was this like super backward nation that like Live Aid and Band Aid, and now to see it joining BRICS, isn't that like you see how quickly that intervention from Russia and China has turned this nation into actually being one of the top 10 BRICS nations in the world. Like that's like a pretty quick ladder. And that was very much helped along. And it's the same with the AES now. It's being helped along. And that's why those three leaders have gone to Russia a multitude of times. Now we have the problem of Sudan, which is like, then I said Obama did that. And then we understand why Obama did it, because there was already some sort of idea that Russia was already making overtures then to these nations. Like they had good relations with Sudan for a long, long time militarily. So when that deal got announced, I think it was in 2019, Bashir got removed, man. Like, you know, same like Gaddafi, like as soon as an agreement like that, like a big strategic one where we're going to let Russia build a military port in the Red Sea, at the port of Khartoum. Of course, like, I mean, unless you don't know yourself, like the West is always going to do what it's always done, which is first send in the jackals to tell that guy, no, you shouldn't do that. Then the next thing will be a genuine threat on his life. Then the next thing will be sending in like the actual guys to do it. And then if they miss, it's going to be regime change. And then we're going to blow up the whole thing. So like, but we didn't need to with Bashir. We got him out of the way, split the country in two. Obama, that was like one of his big successes. He's like, yay, you know, I've created more fractures. So now these formations that are taking place under BRICS and like this potential in the West is not going to happen. Whoa, I'm sorry. You're wrong. It's happening. And like Sudan, it will sort out for sure with the powers that be. They will fix that situation. There will become a clear leader eventually, and that leader will have the mandate to go ahead and probably finish that port that Russia was going to build. And then before you know where you are, like Yemen's in a different situation, and the whole region suddenly starts to change, because that's the thing about the Horn of Africa. It curves around Saudi Arabia, and the gap between Djibouti and Yemen is only 32 kilometers, and there's an island in the middle of it. And if anybody decides to build a bridge in 4 years, well, then that division and is over, because the common interests in economics are way too strong for those nations to not then jump on all the investment opportunities that will come about from that infrastructure and that unification. We just need to, like, I don't think there's, like, I think if I get what you're saying right, I don't think there's a plan to join this with this. It's just, that's not necessary, but there will be regional blocks remade, because a lot of the blocks like ECOWAS, EAC, SADC, they're not all like completely in the Western hands. It's just, it's been a long time that they've been around, and like they haven't fulfilled the mandate that they set out, the vision. Even the African Union, it's not realizing the mandate that it set out. So there needs to be genuine Samaritanism, where you pick your man up and you carry him 10K, and then you're like, go ahead, brother, like, can you walk the rest of the way by yourself? And he's like, for sure, now you've carried me this far. So that's like it, you know? But I don't see it as like a slow creep to, I don't even think they're trying to get rid of the West. Like, that's not the intention. It's not to get us off the continent. It's actually to force us to cooperate. It's to force us, because we got money, we got wealth, we got skills. And all Russia and China are saying is like, just calm down, like come off the Kool-Aid and come and make some others some wealth. Like, it's all right. Like, you've made it. Like, why are you still so intent on like now owning it all? Like, just come. Like, it's actually more fun to develop it together. Like, I don't know. It's just like, what else are you gonna do? You're just gonna sit up there and lead. Like, I don't know. Boring. You know?
But as far as east-west infrastructure, forget about politics and geopolitics. What's going on right now? Are there talks of? Is there construction? Nothing.
Not in linking East and West, not that big yet. There's talk of like a train line going from the western coast to like Niger. That's already been spoken about. So like the three countries in the AES, they've already been talking with Russia about things like that. Like, how do we get access to the ports and also not be dependent on someone? So they have the option of conquering like former territory, because Mauritania has former territory from Mali. Do you want to hear a cool little Twitter thing, that like a little bit of intel that people sent me?
Let's go.
It's intel, so you're like, it could be not. Like, let's have a look. You know, it's fun. Where is it? It was on Mauritania. So this guy on Twitter, right? Yeah. Here we go. So it's a little bit long. I'll try to keep it short. Mali. Goita is on a mission to reconquer some of Malian territory under Mauritanian occupation. This past week, I have seen a series of reconquests of some villages and towns by the Fama Derpa, territories we are told were illegally occupied by Mauritania since the 70s. We also saw the Malian Chief of Staff of the Armed Forces, who went down to Mauritania last Thursday to meet his counterpart, and they discussed common issues and interests pertaining to security at the border. For your info, the Tuareg rebellions in Mali started way back in the early 60s, and since then, Mali has not fully recovered its territorial integrity. So Tuareg we spoke a tiny bit about them before. They were an original resistance movement, but like the Mau Mau in Kenya, they got co-opted and ended up working for their lackeys, maybe even unwittingly. But yeah, it became a force for divide and conquer, with good intentions. But it's like that thing in it. The road to hell is lined with good intentions. So yeah. Started way back in the early 60s, and since then Mali has not fully recovered. Now we are learning that even Mauritania was illegally occupying part of Malian territory, because there was a sign of Malian governmental authority in those areas for a very long time on other older maps that they have. Even the United Nations apparently has these maps that shows Mali having territory that goes all the way to the sea through Mauritania. But this is desert, bear in mind. It's not what people are thinking. There's not a road and a lamp and a primary school there. Just dust. So in the map that is here, like the red imaginary line, you want to see the red imaginary line? Is apparently territories. I think I got rid of the post, but yeah, is apparently territories that belong to Mali. So if we like, if we pull up like Google, because I'm not sharing screen anymore, am I?
No.
But I can quickly show you. Because it is, I mean, this is, well, like it's all, early days. So I can't say whether the intel is like really like accurate or not, but it's moving quickly, the situation. So basically the line of red that he's talking about goes from like here, and bear in mind, Timbuktu used to be the capital of the Mali Empire. So that's like the center of what used to go all the way, like it used to be like Senegal, the Gambia, Guinea-Bissau, Guinea, Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger, right? That was the whole empire before. Like it would span all the way like that, like a big U going in. So the red line, can you see my mouse?
Yes. Yeah, we can.
Red line goes like this. Just underneath their capital, Nouakchott. So they wanna forge a line based on the intel to this line here, so that these 1, 2, 3 are not landlocked anymore and would have a port along here. Right now, they're using the port in Conakry through Guinea, or they're using the port down here through Togo. That's the only way they can receive and let go of goods. Pretty stressful situation.
So you're saying that they would definitely have to like do that in a somewhat secretive manner, is what you're saying, and have like defense for
Or
that?
by agreement with Mauritania. So
Okay.
this straight line is straight because nobody is interested in the territory.
Mm.
Always when we see straight lines, like in Africa,
Mm.
that's basically the region. Like that's basically the reason. Because like, why would humans make a
Mm.
straight? It's not
Right.
logic. Like we don't make straight lines. So like, and yeah, so that border, like, it's not a real border. Like, it's not a real border in the sense of like an actual border, like a cultural border, like an actual. It's not a difference. Like, so that's the thing. Like, a lot of these borders, they were just like literally jotted down on paper, and
Mm.
for any leader, like it's worth asking the question if any of it is legitimate. I mean, for the sake of unification and for the sake of the greater good and bringing people prosperity and a higher standard of living, you probably got better chances doing it unifying than being these separate small entities like Swiss-based states, but without all of the gold that Switzerland has, that like, they're never going to be able to develop themselves. So anyway, I didn't finish it. He said the vast empire of Mali covered a large area of present-day Mali, Senegal, Mauritania, Gambia, Guinea, Niger, and Burkina Faso. But today, Mali ended up being chopped off of its original lands with no access to the sea. Damn it. The harm the colonizers did to us is beyond imagination. Finally, I saw a white blogger, probably a French guy, who used this map and a screenshot of Delphine Sankara post on his current issue and said that Malian trolls are calling for the colonization of southern Mauritania with the aid of Russia. That Goita Assimi, the leader of Mali, is the problem. So the French are saying Goita Assimi and Traore and Chiani are the problem in the sub-region. And this French blogger was saying the same thing. This guy said, what a jerk. If they want to play this card, then let them bring it on. We will reclaim all of our territories that are rightly ours. Anyway, I heard someone say that the United Nations is aware of this illegal occupation of Malian territory because they have the archives and the maps. I'm not surprised because Algeria was also stealing Malian oil for decades and they got caught the day we liberated Kidal. If this is true, then we will reclaim our lands and make our way to the sea and no one will stop us. I saw that Mali has pulled out some of the old maps of their country. Watch this space. That was it. So there is serious movement in the country, and like the people have awoken too. Like there's a bit of an awakening, like in the sense of people are getting educated on it. I will say something just to mention, like last video that I did on Sheikh Alijali, like it was down at like the 1,000.
Everybody's frozen. It's us.
Are you guys having a hard time hearing Nick, or is it on our side?
My side too.
Okay.
He's frozen.
Nick, you froze. So we didn't hear that last part, but just to also for you to keep in mind, there are 3 other people in the queue to ask you a question. It's okay?
Go with questions, people.
Okay. All right. So Chris Semenchik is next on the list.
All right. Thanks, Nick. That was great. You kind of answered my question. It's too big a topic, I think, to get into. I was thinking that Turkey keeps popping up, and they would seem to be a pivotal. They're always like a huge wild card. How do you see Turkey playing out in this in the next couple of years? I guess.
They're like a power broker. They, people know Erdogan and his relationship to the Muslim Brotherhood and the history of that organization. It's like, really messy. But again, like similar circumstance, had rulers, had lackeys that, they were lackeys. So that it's not that they're doing these things independently, and they were often getting paid to do it. So like with Erdogan, yeah, he's like a power broker, and like we can't trust him because we saw the incident between Russia and Turkey in 2017 with the warplanes over Syria and stuff like that. But it all got fixed very quickly. But Turkey's definitely Turkey, Qatar, and Saudi, they play a significant role in that region because of the Islamization of those countries. You've put there, actually, one of the tribes did resist Islamization. Many did. Like I looked at that in Sheikh Anta Diop's class too. The whole Islamization of Africa, and it's an interesting topic. But what was I going to say? Yes, no, the Southeast Asian nations, they are very much involved, especially in North Maghreb. We call it Maghreb Africa. And it's because of the diplomatic relationships that go back many, many years based on the religion. Not that those relationships have always benefited those nations. It's not that, but Turkey is now a positive force in the region. And they're definitely coordinating also with Russia in terms of, like, probably what they're going to do is jump on the economic benefits, right? They've got a lot of great constructors like Yapi Maketsi. They're doing that at the AQU nuclear reactors right now with Russia. It's going to be massive. That's like 8 gigawatt plant, one of the biggest nuclear generations in the world. And they're building a similar thing in El Daba in Egypt. Rosatom's doing both of those, as well as in Hungary. And so, like, we're building quite a map here of Russian and Turkish and Chinese and UAE as well. UAE being a very important country, just recently went to space. They joined the space age. They're offering technical cooperation to these countries too. And often what these countries will do is provide a safe haven for meetings to take place. Russia's a long way to go. Saudi is right there for Maghreb nations. It's a 4-hour flight. So I'd say those three, Saudi, UAE, and Turkey, they play a significant role right now, and they're very much involved diplomatically. And of course, because they all have good relationships with Russia, Russia's probably telling them, hey, you know what? Jump on this one. Yeah, probably. That's how you get your friends involved in a good deal, right? You just say, like, hey, we've set this up. You want to come and have fun? You've got a couple of technical and skilled people. Why don't we all do it together? And so, yeah. Like, for example, the train in Tanzania right now, just a side note, is being built by a Turkish company and a Portuguese company, Motor Engil and Yapi Maketsi. Now, it didn't get built as fast as the Chinese train in Kenya and Ethiopia. Just got to make that stipulation too, because nobody's as good at the Chinese as doing this. Nobody does it as efficiently and as cheap and as fast. And people can debate me on that all day. But I don't make it a national thing. It's just a matter of, like, when you look at the stats, it just is. China built Kenya's train in 4 years. The train in Tanzania started 4 years ago and is still very much not complete. So, but they are a force for good. They're just not as good as Russia and China, but they're good. They're good and they're doing good.
Okay.
Next.
Jerry, you're on.
Yes. Okay, Nick, thank you very much for that wonderful education. I had a question on the terrorism in that area, Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso, because when you were showing those slides, the charts of the increase in terrorism in that area, I mean, I was totally stunned by that. That's unbelievable. But the thing I wanted to ask was, I know, like other countries on that list, like particularly Myanmar and Afghanistan, when the West established the insurgents, terrorists in those areas, it was intimately connected with the drug trade. That's how they were using, the drugs to finance it. So I just wanted to know, with this increase of terrorism in that area, is it tied to the drug trade there as well?
Yeah. Same business.
Mm-hmm.
Same sharp. It hasn't changed.
Makes sense. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, it's a money laundering operation essentially, and you know about it. So, but yeah, that's why I said I noted it like smally, but when it first started, it was just sex trafficking and drug trafficking, and the NATO said like it's not a big enough problem for us to intervene. And there you go.
Because it would interrupt their profits anyway.
That's the thing. It's propping up that system. That is the form of economics. That's the best they got.
Mhm.
They won't even build trains to stick it on.
Oh God. And for those who want to know more about the history of the drug trade in Southeast Asia, Jerry is doing some amazing research on that, and they can check out his Substack page. What's your Substack page, Jerry? It's the full on the trail of the treasonous.
Yes,
Yes.
on the trail of the treasonous.
Rising Tide will be publishing.
And Rising Tide will be publishing his expose. I'm the puppet of Matt right now.
I have a tiny bit on the drug. The northern Mali area has long been the staging point for smuggling drugs flown into various areas of West Africa from South America. This was a primary source of income for criminal networks there, which was augmented by returns from kidnappings of European travelers or workers. The tipping point in favor of Mali jihadists, however, was unleashing of jihadists in Libya, who were the backbone of the on-the-ground forces that overthrew Gaddafi and created the space for chaos and a policy of chaos to basically run those operations over that territory at will. So
it's the black budget that funds everything. Richard Moore.
Oh, I actually have something specific if you want on the Saudi and Qatari funding of individuals.
Sure.
Like the payments.
Okay.
According to one report, $500 a month is offered to teenagers from many West African countries. Another report clarified this. The 16-year-old in this particular case was offered $30 per week and his family would be given $400 a month. Then they are trained in warfare. They become members of the LIFG, which is a guerrilla, rebel group. And they're actually trained in Afghanistan and then sent back to become the nucleus of jihadist forces in West Africa in their home countries once they return. This was the case also for LIFG members who returned to Libya from Afghanistan. So they were trained there to be moved there to stop there and put it copy and paste.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah.
My question, could you turn off screen sharing?
Sure, yeah, sorry.
So you can see, there we are. So you're it was a very interesting talk. And so you're Africa's in a transition state now, obviously. And what I'm thinking, I'm interested in the question of governance. I mean, China has its model of governance and the West has its, which is mostly corruption. Are there any models of governance coming out of the African tradition? You talked about lineages and important and great leaders. I'm just wondering, is Africa got anything to offer in terms of models of governance? And what do you think is going to happen in that regard? At the national level, I mean, I'm not talking about these blocks you're talking about, just at the national level.
Honestly, not on a national level, no. But if you wanted to look, like you would look at specific tribes and their culture, because they have, since a long time, customs and traditions that some of which, upon being practiced, are beautiful, and they definitely align with what I would say the Christian soul, if you want to call it that, or the image of man, like the image of man in his creator's image. So when I look into the cultures of those tribes, like, of course, there's so many, I've only touched the surface, but like I see many examples of very natural mechanisms that came about within those, what we call like city-states, I suppose, actually at the time. from the Mossi to the Soso to the Dome to the Benin tribe. Like we look at Benin art and culture, like from the period like 1400 to 1600, like it's beautiful. So like there's no way you can create that beauty and that design and that creativity without inheriting some essence and substance of the Christ-like soul, right? So I wouldn't look nationally because the political elite, as we've just discussed, for a long time, whether they were traitors, neutral, or patriots, have been upended one way or another, whether it's, you know, coup, regime change, or assassination, to keep each state in a constant frenzy and a state of confusion and chaos, so that essence and that substance that was already there before we got there could never actually realize full fountain development, right? Which is what we tried to do to Russia. Like, you know, that's my next thing, by the way, guys. I'm going to do a class on Diaghilev, Stravinsky, Prokofiev, and how they tried to distort the image of Russia and turn it into an animalistic, bestial nation. And they brought it to Paris under the name the Ballet Russe, and it was all bull.
Wow. We can just take that clip to sell your class for
that's the trailer
the
right
next
there.
one.
Yeah, that's going to become articles on my Substack, and I want to turn it into a book because I had a bit of an intervention with it, and I was like, oh my Lord, it has to be told, because it's like, that's how it all started with Russia, that we started to have this like bestial view of them, because up until 1850, it's all Tchaikovsky, Petersburg, and St. Petersburg is a Renaissance city, if you've ever been to it. Dostoevsky, Tolstoy, Pushkin, it was all of that. And then all of a sudden, with these guys, Diaghilev, who was like, he was financed by John Maynard Keynes later on. That's what I'm giving you for now. And basically, he went to Paris with this thing called the Ballet Russe, where all the dancers were forced to change their names into French names or Russian names, even though they weren't French or Russian. It was all imposter syndrome because they were made to look like the classical version, but they were nothing of it. The first 4 ballets that he did were all 2-dimensional. And if you look at the choreographies, I'll show it when we do a class on it, but it's like L'après-midi d'un faun, which is a pagan story about a faun, you know, doing something naughty while 2 girls bathe in a river. Then you have The Rite of Spring, which is the sacrifice of the chosen one, which is a woman. That's not very nice. Then you have Petrushka, which is like the ugly version of Pinocchio, like really, really nasty story about a kind of like a clown, like a fool puppet thing who gets used and basically just thrown around. Like it's just really pointless story, and it's just really sad and depressing. And by the end, you're just like, why did we learn about this? I remember watching it and being like, why did we, like, what is the point of that story other than to feel awful for this poor doll? And then the last one was The Firebird, which is about a bird trapped in a prince's garden. Like, again, it's just romanticism or barbarism or savage. Like, it doesn't ever have reason. And so then the musical score was Stravinsky, like, bum, 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 bum. Okay, there's no transitions, there's no bridge to anything, it's just sound. And if you understand any of it, you're as nuts as Stravinsky, because I don't. And I've danced to it 3 times. I did Sacre de Printemps 3 times, and every time I finished that show, I came out, went home, and was like questioning why I became a ballet dancer, because it hurt so much. Like, it really, I'm not talking physically, doing the Rite of Spring, I hurt. Yeah, it's like horrible. It's just pain, and you better enjoy suffering because you're on stage for 40 minutes running around and you got to have so much stamina, but there's no beauty. And you need beauty to have stamina. Like, it's very hard to keep spiraling in a show. It's very hard to keep spiraling up when it's just bum, 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 you know?
And you're starting to now compose choreography, so that's very exciting.
Don't tell them, Cynthia.
Sorry.
No, but yeah.
No, but I mean, it's looking very bright for you, and very optimistic for the work that you'll be doing in Kenya as well. Wayne Winrow, you're next, and then I'll call on you, Kevin.
Thank you, Nicholas, for your presentation. I noticed that since you said this program is being recorded, but I was wondering, do you happen to have an article, or do you have another copy of this lecture on this topic? I find it very interesting.
No, not yet. But I will turn it into articles so that I can order it better as well. And yeah, I will take your initiative, actually.
One last question. Are you making your exhibits or slides available for those who would like a copy?
Sure. Like if you would like a copy of the actual presentation itself, I can send it across the mat, and then yeah, like if you want to have the slides,
what we can do, send it to me. We'll create a link so people we'll put in the description box under the video when it gets uploaded onto YouTube, and then people could just download it using that link that we'll include. That way. Huh?
Yeah, great.
Thank you very much.
Pleasure. Thank you, Wayne. Kev.
All right, second question. You talked a little bit about it, and it's in regard to NATO and specifically the US. So from where I stand, I'm seeing more and more some kind of internal tensions inside of NATO. You have on one side the US and on the other side the European countries as a whole, right? And your talk was on Africa, which were all European colonies. And I've heard during the coups that happened in the three countries in Niger, Mali, and Burkina Faso, I've heard rumors. I wasn't able to verify them, but I've heard the rumors that some of those guys were US trained.
Yeah, they were. Some of them.
Right. So what do you have to say about this? Is it does it put weight to that idea that there's some tension between US and Europe, or what? How do you see that?
That's a good one. That there's some tension between Europe based on those guys training in the US and not training in Europe?
Well, more in the sense that maybe it was a play by the US to get Europe out of Africa. I don't know. I'm just
honestly, that's always been a play. Like if you going from independence, I think the USA was under certain leaderships trying to unseat France. France is a funny old nation because it's not that they always played a bad role. They had good leaders. This is the thing. Like France, even in, well, not in my lifetime, but just before my lifetime, like they had some good guys who tried to like help Africa, and like they actually tried to sort things out. But then you got London and you got Wall Street. So then that was the thing. Like then Britain was pulling strings in Ghana and Nigeria, who were the dominant nations in that region. And Nigeria especially is the point, okay? Nigeria is the economic powerhouse that has already become, but the economic disparity in that nation is really bad. And we like it like that because we can control that situation. But we got to make sure that those countries around Nigeria stay in a constant state of chaos and confusion so that Nigeria also doesn't become a regional leader, and like that we don't see a reunification of those empire nation state civilizations that existed before, because today the most powerful one, at least in economically, who could actually bring about the real picture of that is Nigeria. They have the deposits in oil and stuff like that too. So there was a lot of like whenever the French started trying to do good, yeah, no, very much the Americans and British were like, nah. Because that's going to make France more powerful. So like, nah. Because like the whole project with the European Union was to like scapegoat Europe, like Germany especially, to make sure that Germany didn't become allied with Russia. Because then we have Eurasia, like then we have Berlin to Baghdad railway too under Bismarck. And then you have Alexander Bismarck in Speech the other day talking and telling the Russians that the German youth is not that anti-Russian, and all it takes is for a generational change and things are going to get better between Germany and Russia again. I think he's a little bit naive, but that's what he said. And we can see with these characters from Europe, there's always going to be that policy. Europe is an independent continent, like, you know, even if it's vassalized now, the psychology and the epistemology of a lot of those people there, like independent all the way. You'll never be able to change that because the culture's like they're so well developed and they're very strong and there's a lot of beauty. And it's not worth getting all rid of that just because we want to remain powerful. Like I'd rather remain free.
Well, it's that monarchical sentiment, right? The European blue blood. We rule the world, kind of we're better than everyone else. But I just wanted to mention another data point too. Is that I think it was last year when France was set up to sell some submarines to Australia, and then the US just pulled the rug under them.
Exactly.
So it shows again that the US and France, or at least the European nations, are not.
Yeah, I mean, and look at Nord Stream. Like, even though the current lackeys at the top of the European leadership are going along with it, yeah, none of them really represent Europe, do they? That's the thing. And they're definitely doing it for America's interests because America's economy is still growing. It's the only one in the West that's still growing because everybody else is paying for America's continued growth now. That's because we're buying LPG from America to basically keep the heat on rather than taking it from Russia. Okay, so just yesterday in Spieth, what's his name? Not Rogozin. Sechin, or what, the guy who runs the oil and the gas, he equated the actual loss of the European Union in the past 3 years as $640 billion in energy. That's how much more we've spent in Europe since delivering that blow to the Nord Stream and shutting off Russian gas. 630 or 40.
You mean the economic consequences of the Nord Stream is 600 billion? God damn it.
We have paid 600 billion more for our energy for the same amount from taking it from Qatar and America than from taking it from Russia.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, thanks,
now the Russians are just telling us. They're just telling us, by the way, you've paid this much to separate from us and we're richer. Keep doing it.
Yeah, I think people should also be aware that de Gaulle was trying to set up a separate economic system from the Anglo-American.
Keep doing whatever you're doing, actually, because...
Sorry, Nick. The timing is off because I think there was a freezing and I might have cut you off. But I wanted to just bring up the Adenauer-de Gaulle situation because de Gaulle was actually trying to set up a separate economic system out of the Anglo-American stronghold, the City of London, Wall Street stronghold, and they were actually trading in the Middle East, but also with like South Korea and Brazil for nuclear technology. In the case of the Middle East, it was for oil. And that was the kind of trade that was, again, verboten, right? Because you're not supposed to trade so that you can actually enable these countries to be something other than a raw resource outsourcer. And so Robert Dreyfus actually had a very interesting theory that the whole Jimmy Carter fiasco with Iran was meant as an excuse to basically freeze the assets internationally, which actually killed the de Gaulle Adenauer economic system that they were trying to start up in its cradle, and it also jeopardized Japan, that was also involved in this. And in addition, the United States had gone to France to tell them, and Germany, that they were not allowed to trade and give nuclear technology to even Brazil or South Korea. So it's very much this policy that you had to keep everybody down, and they were willing to cut the throats of France, Germany, and Japan as well. So it's not even about the how we're told that Iran can't have nuclear technology because Iran is a terrorist country or whatnot. So yeah, it's been a very anti-human policy. As Lawrence Freeman, actually, he gave a class 2 weeks before you. We're doing the African theme, A really good class for people to also check out. The rules-based order is an anti-human, policy that we're told constantly countries have to go along with. As you're saying, these countries have been put in a position where they have no choice but to go into the black market, because the legal economy and the economy that will provide a future is constantly violently sabotaged economically and militarily through these terrorist organizations that are receiving their funding from NATO. So Richard Moore has a follow-up question, and then Jerry is next. If you have time, Nick.
Follow up on the governance thing.
Yeah.
So you mentioned that traditionally there were these very natural forms of governance that were a thing of beauty. So my question is there any way that might come back into, some of that may come back into force rather than just say copying the Western model,
I don't think for any like people with an inherent culture, like, you can't placate. It doesn't matter how hard the work's going to be to restore the past. I don't think you can placate. Like, it will always be false, and you could not take someone else's system and make it your own. I just really don't believe in that, and maybe I'm wrong, but like, I remember listening to Kwame Nkrumah talking about a United States of Africa, but it still looked very different to the United States of America. It's a very different formation because, of course, the size, the scope, the geography, the geology, the amount of tribes, and they're ethnic tribes. They're not immigrants. They're natural, like they're, of there originally. So, yeah, what will work for Africa is what Africa already has. And okay, like the period of colonization has created a lot of things hidden in the dust. And so I say it's going to take a lot of work. I don't know how much time, but a lot of work. But I certainly know that in the next 30 years, there's going to be so many people born on that continent, there will be enough people to do the work given the vision. So I believe it's possible to restore and rebirth the former nations and cultures and to pick the best of those former empires and nation states and civilizations, and then to reform that, rebirth that in a modern world, maybe with elements from that person, but the base will still be of that continent because there's enough. There's over 2,500 tribes on the continent, so like, and they are all ethnically different. Like, I've been to Africa now enough that when I'm there, I see, like, I can see it. I can see the tribes. I can actually see and know straight away, like, your Luo, Kikuyu, Kalenjin, Maasai. Same way I know someone's French or Swedish, or not absolute, but like, after 10-minute conversation, based on ethnic differences, the mind, cultural differences, or like, how the way we think, and then the soul, like the cultural difference, like the stories and the things and the way they say it and the way they talk to me. And so like you have all of that, and some are more aggressive, some more humoristic. That's culture too. Like, you see that in peoples like Japanese or German or Swiss, or right? And you got Swiss and Italy sharing a border, like, wow, so yeah, it's just my British way of making a joke, but yeah, got all of this diversity to take from. It's just, it needs to be restored. And right now, the reason why people can't go and touch it is because there's not a book on it, or there's where are those 1 million manuscripts that are in Timbuktu and Alexandria? Where are they? I want to know that. That's my next question.
We know where they are. They're in the Queen's basement.
No, they're in Timbuktu.
They're in Timbuktu.
I think they're in Timbuktu, Cynthia.
Really?
I just think I don't think they needed to take them. I just think nobody would bother when you've already got this imposition of this darkness of, like, it's the same like the Russians in the 20s, like, it's bestial, you don't want to go to Russia. They're all like
but not everyone has access to it, right? Is what you're saying?
No, like, I looked at the Sankora University, and anyway, it's it's a UNESCO site. So we know how UNESCO has been used to
Okay.
like like to preserve, but like on the other hand, it's like to hold up. So like I don't think many people can really go in there. And like that's the thing, you go into UNESCO site, you can go into one room. You can't go into the 20. And then you go on Google and you're like, did they take pictures of the 20? No. And then you're like, so why are we not allowed to see a photo of them? Oh, yeah, it's just ridiculous. Like to open the gates of these things that have been shut. Some of it will be hard, some of it will be easy. Some of it you'll just walk in and you'll be like, there's not a security guard here. It's like, no, they just never expected anybody to come along and look. I don't know, maybe that guy will be me or Larry Freeman. I know Larry Freeman, he's gone a lot to Africa and he's walked. And having spoken to him about that, he told me you've got to walk. Otherwise, you never know things the way you know them when you walk them. And I guess we're all gonna have to go to Lalibela and these places and walk and feel, and some define things like, hey, look here. You're like, oh, we're mining over there, boys. Yeah.
And on that note, UNESCO is not allowed into a whole bunch of countries because they were deemed a threat to national security. But I think that, you know, as we're going to see with an alternative economic system being put online, these countries will have more and more of a real choice in terms of which direction they go, because right now long-term investments are still like pretty scarce, and the World Bank and IMF have really had a hegemony on that until recently. So again, really keeping the world backwards. And also, you know, there's been a lot of looting from the City of London into offshore accounts from Africa. It's not just like corrupt African leaders, but there's been a lot of money that has been taken out of Africa illegally from the City of London offshore financial system.
Like look what they did to Mugabe. You know, that's for anybody who believed all of that, just go and check out that case with Zimbabwe. Zimbabwe has announced that they might be creating a gold-backed currency, so watch that space too, because they got a lot of gold. So they could, if someone would allow them, maybe like like Emerson Mnangagwa was just with Putin like the whole weekend. So,
this is really exciting because, again, there's so many countries in Africa that are now in a position where they can start actually forming their own stratagems, and it's going to really put the Anglo-American you know, hegemony. It's going to be very challenging for them to try to like put out all of these you know, countries now starting to do their own decision making. Jerry, you are next, and I think then that's it. We can close.
Oh, okay. Nick, I wanted to ask you a history question, actually, ancient history. Some of the books I've been reading lately, and it's about that area in Africa, you know, in Western Africa. I guess you'd call it the ECOWAS area, but it's a theory, and I like it, that the emergence of African civilization came from that area in Western Africa, and from there spread and migrated to Southern Africa and also to Eastern Africa. And this is my own thought, that there's also the possibility of the emergence of man himself from that area, contrary to other things we're taught. And I just wanted to know, in your research, if it's gone back 2 million years, if you had any thoughts on that.
Good one, Jerry. Good one. Wait, I'm gonna go jump in the time travel machine and I'm gonna just 5. Honestly, like it's basically like, it's not my everyday question, but it's that thing of like, I'm not satisfied with the history and I'm not satisfied with what the past tells us about the future. So it's that thing of like, we're missing pieces. And like, you know, you want to go back to the whole Adam and Eve thing. Like, yeah, like, okay, so Sheikh Hamza Diop, I just go from him. Like, he said that of all of the geological conditions in the world, Africa has the best conditions for the manifestation of life. And we can see that He made that principal argument based on the amount of mammals. Okay, so like all of the great big mammals that we all love looking at and find so beautiful as God's creations exist in Africa. So there you go, right there on a biological scale, like environmental, like the most impressive of God's works were done in that continent. Things like, and then we talk of the great mass of water that existed in the Great Rift Valley all those years ago that probably extended all the way to Lake Chad from Lake Victoria. I hate calling it that. We've got to change that name as soon as possible. But all of those lakes around there, from Tanganyika to Albert to Victoria, there's many. It's a whole chain. Okay, it's massive. And it probably was part of the Nile River. Like that river was probably bigger. And because the Nile River goes all the way down to those lakes. You got the White Nile that goes all the way down and the blue one that goes off to its source in Ethiopia, which is where the GERD has been built. But you got Lake Chad, which doesn't sit that far away. And this is why also the whole thing with the growing of the desert is just lunacy again, because it's really not like with the science and technology that we know today, it shouldn't be that hard to push it back and to regrow. Like we've seen what China's done, so we this can be done. That we regrow the forests that were previously there that were wiped out, you know, maybe by human civilization or just by droughts and famine and geological conditions too. But to answer your question more specifically, I do, and I hypothesize all the time about where. So like for a long time, I've thought that basically the beginning of human civilization probably started around the Great Lake region, which is when, like, that's what Sheikh Anta Diop told me. Because he say this region is geographically, like geologically, the most harmonious, like he called it the sanctuary, because it's the great savanna, it's the great grasslands, it's over 1,000 meters above sea level. The air is very clean. The soil is red soil. It's virgin soil. It's rich. That's why Kenya can, you know, grow anything, or like Uganda and all these countries, they just have great agriculture because the land, you just drop a seed. And so, yeah, like my thinking has always gone to the central region, actually, like around those lakes and around Lake Chad too. Maybe there wasn't just one. That's the other thing that we have to ask ourselves. Is it just one story, or is it a story of many in one? And we're just looking at the metaphor. So like, yeah, like, but then the many come from the one. I don't know. It's a hard one, right? Like, it's just really hard. And I keep on juggling it back and forth. And one day in our future history, we will know where we come from. But I think the further we go forward, the further we have to go back. And that's why archaeology is so important. And we haven't done enough, because the British did a certain amount, but then of using UNESCO and stuff, they've kind of shut down the continuance of lifting up the dirt. So we have this idea also now of history of like that. That's why they told us history's over, like Francis Fukuyama, like, you know, it's ended. And so we know enough now to say that we know everything. And that's the thing. It's this complete farce. I think if we go on another process of discovery with the world and we uplift some of the dirt in Africa, where we use mapping and have a look at what's underneath, we're going to find, like, you know, our origins more, you know?
Beautifully said, Nick. And I think that's a good place to end today's lecture. Again, really appreciate this, Nick, and looking forward to your future presentations, including the ballet, the history of the ballet. And also for people to note, you know, Africa, as Lawrence Freeman was making a point in his class, Africa is massive. It's actually way bigger than how it's shown on the world map. And it is totally unnatural for such a huge portion of the world to be kept unnaturally down. And I think that we can be very optimistic for the next renaissance to occur in Africa. I think that is something that is very likely to occur, hopefully within our lifetime. So with that, thanks everybody. And next week we will have Uwe Alschner, who will do a lecture on Schiller's aesthetical letters. All right. Until then.
Thank you so much, guys.
Thank you.
Always a pleasure. Love it.